I'm Sylvia Allen, 32, and after 3 years of silent fertility struggles, I was finally celebrating the miracle growing inside me. My baby shower was perfect pastel decorations, loving friends, and the joy I'd waited so long to feel. Then, my sister Emma stood up, wine glass raised, and announced she was pregnant too. The room erupted in cheers while my heart shattered. She had stolen my moment, my spotlight, my one day to feel special. But Emma didn't know what the ultrasound had revealed just days before. She thought she was announcing one pregnancy to compete with mine. She had no idea I was carrying twins. As I watched her bask in the attention that should have been mine, I realized this wasn't just about a baby shower. This was about a lifetime of being overshadowed, dismissed, and forgotten. But not anymore. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, subscribe for more stories of finding your voice and claiming your worth. The silence that followed Emma's announcement was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of a satisfied crowd, but the awkward, suffocating silence of people who knew something was terribly wrong, but didn't know how to address it. I watched as my friend Sarah's smile faltered, her eyes darting between Emma and me. My cousin Lisa actually winced, her hand instinctively reaching for her wine glass. Even my mother-in-law, usually so quick with enthusiastic congratulations, seemed frozen in place. "Well," my friend Jenny finally said, her voice artificially. "Bright, what wonderful news for both of you." But I could see the concern in her eyes as she looked at me. She knew. They all knew that Emma had just stolen my thunder on what was supposed to be my special day. Emma basked in the attention, accepting congratulations with the gracious smile she'd perfected over the years. "I just couldn't wait to share," she gushed, her hand dramatically placed on her still flat stomach. "When I found out yesterday, I knew I had to tell everyone at the same time as Sylvia. It's like we're pregnancy twins." Pregnancy twins. The irony wasn't lost on me. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to play the part of the supportive sister. But inside, I was screaming. This was supposed to be about me, about the miracle I'd fought so hard for. Instead, it had become the Emma show, as everything always did. Mark's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. When I looked at him, I saw my own hurt reflected in his eyes. He knew what this meant to me, knew how long I'd waited for this moment. He'd been there through every negative test, every disappointed hope, every whispered prayer. The rest of the shower passed in a blur of forced smiles and shared congratulations. People kept looking between Emma and me, unsure how to navigate a social minefield. The baby shower guest book, which should have been filled with messages of joy for me and my baby, became a collection of awkward well wishes for both of us. "So excited for both babies," wrote one guest. "Double the joy," wrote another, but I could read between the lines. Several entries were clearly meant for me alone, hastily amended to include Emma after her announcement. As guests began to leave. The hugs felt different, tighter, more apologetic. Sarah lingered, helping me gather gifts while Emma held court by the door. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered as we packed baby clothes into bags. "That was that was really something." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The gifts, carefully chosen for my baby, now felt tainted by Emma's presence. Every onesie, every blanket, every toy would forever remind me of the day my sister made my baby shower about her. When the last guest finally left, Emma approached me with that same radiant smile. "Wasn't that wonderful?" she said, as if she orchestrated the whole thing. "I just knew everyone would be so excited for us." "Us," as if this had been our shower all along. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse. "James is taking me to dinner to celebrate." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "Thanks for such a lovely shower, Sylvia. It was perfect." And then she was gone, leaving me standing in the wreckage of what was supposed to be my perfect day, Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I finally let the tears fall. In the silence of our living room, surrounded by baby gifts and the lingering scent of Emma's perfume, I made a decision. I was done being the supporting character in my own life. The fertility clinic bills sat in a manila folder on our kitchen counter, a paper trail of hope and heartbreak that totaled more than our first car. 3 years of treatments, procedures, and prayers that had nearly bankrupted us emotionally and financially. I stared at the stack of invoices, each one representing another month of disappointment. Dr. Martinez's office, the pharmacy, the lab, the specialist in the city, numbers that added up to dreams deferred, and a marriage tested in ways I never imagined. "Remember when we thought it would be easy?" Mark said softly, appearing behind me with 2 cups of coffee. He'd taken the day off after the shower, sensing I needed him close. I did remember. 3 years ago, we'd been so naive, so optimistic. We'd thrown away my birth control pills with ceremony, toasting with champagne to the baby-making project. We'd expected to be pregnant within months, maybe even weeks. The first negative test was disappointing but not devastating. The second was concerning. By the 10th, I was spiraling into a dark place I'd never known existed. Maybe we're trying too hard, well-meaning friends would say. Just relax and it will happen. As if 3 years of temperature charts, ovulation kits, and timed intimacy could be undone by simply relaxing. The miscarriages were the worst part. 3 times I'd seen those 2 pink lines, felt that surge of joy, only to have it ripped away weeks later. The last one had been at 12 weeks, far enough along that we'd told our families, started planning, began to believe that Emma had sent a text that day. "Sorry about the baby. At least you know you can get pregnant now. At least you know you can get pregnant now." As if the loss of our child was just a positive data point in my fertility journey. During those dark months, Emma's life had seemed effortlessly perfect. She'd met James, gotten engaged, bought a house, started a successful marketing business. Everything fell into place for her while I struggled with the basics of biology that seemed to work for everyone else. The financial strain had been brutal. Our insurance covered basic testing, but not the more advanced treatments. We'd maxed out credit cards, borrowed from retirement funds, taken second jobs. While our friends bought houses and went on vacations, we funneled every spare dollar into the possibility of a baby. I found a support group Mark had suggested after the second miscarriage for couples going through this. I'd resisted at first. The idea of sitting in a circle, sharing our pain with strangers, felt like admitting defeat. But eventually, desperation won out. The support group had been a revelation. 8 couples, all fighting the same battle, all carrying the same burden of hope and grief. Linda and Tom had been trying for 7 years. Sarah and Mike had gone through 4 rounds of IVF. Janet was facing her 5th miscarriage. "People don't understand," Linda had said during my first meeting. "They think if you want a baby badly enough, it will happen. They don't understand that. Sometimes your body just doesn't cooperate." I'd found comfort in their stories, in the knowledge that I wasn't alone in this struggle. We celebrated each other's successes and mourned each other's losses. When Linda finally got pregnant after 7 years, we all cried with joy. When Sarah and Mike decided to stop trying, we supported their decision with love and understanding. But Emma had never understood. During the worst of it, when I'd been raw and broken from the latest loss, she'd complained about how my situation was affecting family gatherings. "You're so sad all the time," she'd said over Christmas dinner. "Can't you just be happy for what you have, what I had?" A marriage strained by grief, a bank account emptied by hope, and a sister who couldn't understand why I couldn't just get over it and move on. The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma's accidental pregnancy had probably cost her nothing more than a missed period and a drugstore test. While I'd spent 3 years and thousands of dollars trying to create the life she'd stumbled into without effort. Mark wrapped his arms around me, pulling me back to the present. She doesn't know, he said quietly. She doesn't know what we've been through. But she should care enough to ask, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. She should care enough to think about how her announcement might affect me. He was quiet for a moment, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Emma had never asked about our fertility struggles. She'd never offered support, never acknowledged our pain, never even seemed to notice that we'd been absent from family functions during the worst of it. The twins are healthy, Mark said finally. Dr. Martinez said everything looks perfect. The twins, our miracle babies, conceived after we'd almost given up hope. The pregnancy that had surprised even our fertility specialist, who'd warned us that multiples were rare in natural conception after fertility treatments. I want to tell everyone, I said suddenly. I want to share the joy, the way I should have been able to at the shower. Mark smiled, understanding immediately. When? Soon, I said, looking at the bills one more time before closing the folder. Very soon. Emma had stolen my moment, but she didn't know what moment she'd actually stolen. She thought she was competing with one baby. She had no idea that I was carrying two miracles, two lives that represented everything we'd fought for and dreamed of. For the first time since the shower, I felt a spark of something other than sadness. Not quite satisfaction, not quite revenge, but something closer to justice. Emma had spent years being the center of attention, the golden child who never had to fight for anything. But this time, this one time, I was going to shine brighter. The family Christmas photos lined the mantel in my parents' living room like a timeline of favoritism. Year after year, the same pattern. Emma front and center, radiant smile, arms spread wide as if embracing the world. And there I was, slightly to the side, smile smaller, posture more reserved. Forever the supporting cast in the Emma show. I stood in front of them now, 2 days after the shower, waiting for my parents to return from their afternoon walk. Mark had encouraged me to talk to them about what had happened, to help them understand why Emma's announcement had been so hurtful. Maybe they didn't see it the way you did, he'd said gently. Maybe they were just excited about having 2 grandchildren. But I knew better. I'd seen the pattern my whole life. In the 1995 photo, Emma was 7 and I was 5. She's wearing a red velvet dress, her blonde curls perfectly styled, her smile wide and confident. I'm in a green dress that's slightly too big. My dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, my expression more serious. Even then, you could see the difference in how we approached the world, or how the world approached us. The pattern continued through the years. Emma front and center for her first day of school, her dance recitals, her graduation. I was always there, always smiling, always supportive, but never the star of my own story. Sylvia was such a good student, my mother would tell people. So responsible, so mature for her age. But when she talked about Emma, her eyes would light up. Emma's so creative, so vibrant. She just has this spark, you know? Emma had won the school talent show in 8th grade with a mediocre rendition of a pop song. I'd been accepted to the state science fair the same year, but somehow Emma's 3-minute performance had overshadowed my months of research and experimentation. It's just that Emma's achievements are more visible, my father had explained when I'd asked why they were missing my science fair presentation to attend. Emma's celebratory dinner. Your academic success is wonderful, sweetie, but it's not really something we can share with the family. Not something they could share with the family. As if my intelligence, my hard work, my dedication meant nothing because it couldn't be performed or displayed. The front door opened, and I heard my parents' familiar voices, my mother chattering about the neighbor's new garden, my father responding with interested murmurs. They'd been married for 35 years, and their routine was as predictable as sunrise. Sylvia, My mother's face lit up when she saw me. What a wonderful surprise. We were just talking about yesterday, about how exciting it is to have two grandchildren on the way. Two grandchildren, not your pregnancy or your baby. Two grandchildren, as if Emma and I were equals in this journey. Mom, can we talk about yesterday? I asked, settling into the familiar floral armchair that had been my spot since childhood. About what happened at the shower. My father looked up from sorting through the mail. It was a lovely shower, sweetheart. Your sister was so excited to share her news, but it was my shower, I said carefully. My baby shower for my baby. Of course it was, my mother said, settling onto the couch with a cup of tea. And Emma was just so thrilled to be able to celebrate with you. She said she couldn't wait to tell everyone at the same time as you were being honored, the same time as I was being honored. Not she hijacked your moment, or she should have waited. Emma was being considerate in their eyes by sharing the spotlight rather than demanding her own. Did you ever think about how that might make me feel? I asked, to have my day, my celebration, turned into something about Emma. My parents exchanged one of those looks that married couples develop, a silent communication that excluded everyone else. Sylvia, my father said in his patient, reasonable tone, Emma was just excited. She's young, she's in love, and she's having her first baby. You can't expect her to contain that joy just because you were having a party. Just because I was having a party. As if my baby shower was a casual get-together rather than a celebration of the miracle I'd fought 3 years to achieve. She could have told me privately first, I said, my voice getting smaller despite my efforts to stay strong. She could have asked if it was okay to announce at my shower. Oh, honey, my mother said with a small laugh. You're being a bit dramatic, don't you think? Emma was just sharing her happiness. Besides, now you can go through your pregnancies together. Won't that be fun? Fun. My 3 years of struggle, my carefully planned shower, my one day to be the center of attention, all reduced to fun, because now Emma and I could be pregnant together. I need you to understand something, I said, my voice steadier now. I've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years. 3 years of treatments, of heartbreak, of hope and disappointment. Yesterday was supposed to be about celebrating this miracle baby, and Emma turned it into her announcement. My father set down his mail. Sylvia, we know you and Mark have been trying for a while, but Emma didn't mean any harm. She was just excited. She never means any harm, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. She never has to think about how her actions affect other people because you always excuse her behavior. That's not fair, my mother said, her voice taking on the defensive tone I knew so well. Emma has a generous heart. She wanted to share this moment with you. She wanted to share my moment, I corrected. There's a difference. You're being jealous, my father said quietly, and that's not like you, Sylvia. You've always been so supportive of your sister, always so supportive, always so understanding, always so willing to step aside and let Emma shine. What if I don't want to be supportive this time? I asked. What if I want to be upset that my sister hijacked my baby shower? The silence that followed was uncomfortable, the kind that happens when you've said something that breaks an unspoken family rule. Well, my mother said finally, I suppose that's your choice. But I think you'll regret letting jealousy poison what should be a joyful time for both of you. Both of us. Always both of us, never just me. I stood up, my hands instinctively moving, to my stomach where my twins were growing. I should go, I said. Mark's making dinner. Sylvia, my father called as I reached the door. Emma loves you. She didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said, and I did know. Emma never meant to hurt me, but she also never tried not to. She moved through the world, assuming that everyone would accommodate her needs, her timeline, her desires. And they always had, but not this time. This time, I had something she didn't know about. Something that would shift the balance of power in ways she couldn't imagine. As I drove home, I thought about the Christmas photos on the mantle. Emma always in the center, always the focus, always the star. But this Christmas, the photo would be different. This Christmas, I would be the one with the bigger news, the greater joy, the more impressive achievement Emma thought she was having. One baby. She had no idea I was having two. For the first time in my life, I was going to upstage my sister. And I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. The text came the next morning while I was having breakfast, casual and dismissive in the way that only Emma could manage. Hope you had fun at the shower yesterday. So excited we can go through this pregnancy journey together. I stared at the message, my coffee growing cold as I read it again. Hope you had fun at the shower yesterday. Not thank you for letting me share your special day, or I'm sorry if I surprised you with my announcement. Just a breezy assumption that I'd had fun at my own hijacked baby shower. Mark looked up from his newspaper. Emma? He asked, reading my expression. I showed him the phone. He shook his head slowly. She really doesn't get it, does she? She never does, I said, scrolling through her text history. Months of messages from Emma, most of them about her life, her problems, her needs. When had she last asked how I was doing? When had she last shown interest in my life beyond what I could do for her? I found the conversation from 3 months ago, when I'd had another negative pregnancy test and had been feeling particularly low. I'd reached out to Emma, hoping for some sisterly support. Having a rough day, I texted, could use some sister time. Her response, can't today, crazy busy with the wedding planning. James's mom is being such a nightmare about the flowers. Rain check? The rain check had never come. But 2 days later, she'd called asking if I could help her address wedding invitations because her hand was cramping. I scrolled further back, finding similar patterns. Emma asking for help with her resume, her relationship problems, her apartment search. Me offering support, advice, time. But when I'd mentioned that Mark and I were struggling with fertility issues, her response had been, that sucks. Have you tried those fertility smoothies? I saw them on Instagram. Instagram solutions for a medical problem that had consumed 3 years of my life. My phone buzzed with another message from Emma. We should totally do a joint baby shower. How cute would that be? A joint baby shower? After she'd already co-opted my actual baby shower, now she wanted to make it official. The audacity was breathtaking. I can't, I said to Mark, showing him the latest message. I can't keep pretending this is okay. Then don't, he said simply. For once in your life, tell Emma how you really feel. I looked at him, surprised by the steel in his voice. Mark was usually the peacekeeper, the one who encouraged me to give people the benefit of the doubt. But something about Emma's behavior had clearly pushed him past his limit too. You think I should? I asked. I think you should do whatever feels right to you, he said. But I'm tired of watching you make yourself smaller to accommodate Emma's selfishness. His words hit me like a physical blow. Make yourself smaller. Is that what I'd been doing all these years? Shrinking myself to fit into the space Emma left for me? I looked at my phone again, at Emma's casual assumption that I'd be thrilled to share everything with her. The pregnancy journey, the celebrations, the attention, all of it split down the middle as if we were children dividing a toy. For the first time in my life, I typed exactly what I was thinking. Actually, Emma, I'm not really interested in sharing this experience. I'd like to focus on my own pregnancy right now. I hit send before I could change my mind. The response came back immediately. Wow, okay. Didn't know you were going to be weird about this. I was trying to be nice. Making my baby shower about her announcement was being nice. Planning a joint celebration was being nice. In Emma's world, everything she did was a favor to everyone else. Another message. I thought you'd be happy to have company during pregnancy, but I guess you want to be selfish about it. Selfish, the word that had been used to control me since childhood. Anytime I'd wanted something for myself, anytime I'd asked for attention or recognition, I'd been called selfish. It was Emma who had demanded constant attention, Emma who had expected everyone to revolve around her needs, but somehow I was the selfish one for wanting my own pregnancy to be about me. "What's she saying?" Mark asked, noticing my white knuckles as I gripped the phone. I showed him the messages. His jaw tightened. "She's unbelievable." "She's calling me selfish," I said, my voice small. "Maybe I'm being selfish." "Sylvia," Mark said firmly, taking the phone from my hands and setting it aside. "Wanting your own baby shower to be about your baby is not selfish. Wanting to enjoy your pregnancy without having to share the spotlight is not selfish. Emma announcing her pregnancy at your shower, that was selfish." I knew he was right, but 32 years of conditioning was hard to overcome. Emma had always been the victim in our family dynamic, the one who was misunderstood or hurt by other people's selfishness. I've been trained to accommodate her, to make allowances, to be the bigger person. "I'm proud of you," Mark said, pulling me close. "For the first time, you told Emma exactly what you were thinking. That's progress." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a longer message. "Fine, be that way. But when you're dealing with morning sickness and pregnancy problems all alone, don't come crying to me. I was trying to be supportive, but if you want to push me away, that's your choice. Mom and Dad are going to be so disappointed that you're creating drama over nothing." Creating drama over nothing. The classic Emma move hurt someone, then make them the villain when they react to being hurt. But this time, something was different. This time, instead of feeling guilty and rushing to apologize, I felt something else. Clarity. For the first time, I could see the pattern clearly, could recognize the manipulation tactics that had controlled me for decades. "She's telling me that Mom and Dad will be disappointed," I said, showing Mark the message. "Let them be disappointed," he said. "You're about to be a mother yourself. It's time to stop living your life to avoid disappointing people who should be supporting you." I turned off my phone and set it in the drawer. "I'm done," I said. "I'm done trying to manage Emma's feelings. I'm done making myself smaller to make her comfortable." "Good," Mark said, kissing my forehead. "Because you're about to have 2 babies who need their mother to be strong and confident. They need to see you standing up for yourself. 2 babies. The secret that Emma didn't know, the truth that would change everything. She thought she was competing with 1 baby, 1 pregnancy, 1 moment of joy. She had no idea that I was carrying twice the miracle she was. The thought made me smile for the first time since the shower. Emma had always been the one with the bigger news, the more dramatic story, the more impressive achievement. But this time, this one time, I had the trump card, and I wasn't going to play it until the moment was perfect. The voicemail from my mother arrived at 3:47 p.m. Just as I was starting to feel proud of myself for setting boundaries with Emma. Her voice was strained, disappointed, the tone she'd used when I was a child and had failed to meet her expectations. "Sylvia, honey, Emma called me very upset. She said you were being mean to her about the pregnancy and that you didn't want her to be involved in your journey. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this." Emma was just excited, and now she's crying because she thinks you hate her. "Please call me back so we can sort this out." I stared at the phone, my brief moment of confidence crumbling. Emma was crying. Emma was upset. And somehow, once again, I was the one who needed to fix it. Mark found me sitting on the couch, staring at the phone. "What happened?" "Mom called," I said, playing the voicemail for him. "Emma told her I was being mean." "Of course she did," Mark said, his voice tight with frustration. "She can't handle being told no, so she runs to Mommy." "But maybe I was too harsh," I said, doubt creeping in. "Maybe I should have been more understanding." "Sylvia," Mark said, sitting beside me and taking my hands. "Listen to me. You told your sister that you wanted to focus on your own pregnancy instead of sharing the experience with her. That's not harsh. That's healthy. But the guilt was already eating at me. Emma crying. Emma upset. Emma thinking I hated her. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. The responsibility I'd carried since childhood to manage Emma's emotions, to be the understanding one, the mature one, the one who sacrificed her own needs for family peace. I called my mother back. "Oh, Sylvia," she said immediately, her voice flooding with relief. "I'm so glad you called. Emma is just devastated." She called me sobbing, saying you didn't want her to be part of your pregnancy. "That's not what I said," I replied carefully. "I said I wanted to focus on my own pregnancy right now." "But honey, why would you want to exclude your sister? She's so excited about being pregnant at the same time as you. She thought it would be something special you could share." "Something special we could share?" "Not something special for me, but something we could share." Even my pregnancy, my miracle after 3 years of struggle, had to be shared with Emma. "Mom, did Emma tell you what happened at the shower?" "She said she announced her pregnancy and everyone was so happy for both of you." "She announced her pregnancy at my baby shower," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Without warning me, without asking if it was okay, she turned my celebration into her announcement. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, and I could hear the dismissal in her voice. She was just excited. "You know how Emma is, she acts on impulse when she's happy." "But it was my day," I said, my voice getting smaller. "My shower for my baby." "Of course it was," my mother said soothingly. And Emma didn't take anything away from that. She just added to the joy. "Now you have twice the reason to celebrate." Twice the reason to celebrate? My mother genuinely couldn't understand why I was upset. In her mind, Emma's announcement had enhanced my shower, not hijacked it. "I need you to understand something," I said, drawing strength from Mark's encouraging nod. "I've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years. 3 years of treatments, of heartbreak, of hope and disappointment. Yesterday was supposed to be about celebrating this miracle, and Emma made it about her." "Sylvia," my mother said gently, "I know you and Mark have been trying for a while, but you can't expect Emma to put her life on hold just because you've had some difficulties." "Some difficulties?" 3 years of my life, thousands of dollars, countless tears, all reduced to some difficulties that shouldn't inconvenience Emma. "I'm not asking her to put her life on hold," I said. "I'm asking her to be considerate of my feelings." "And I'm asking you to be considerate of hers," my mother replied. "She's young, she's in love, and she's having her first baby. She wanted to share that joy with her family. What about my feelings?" I asked, "What about my joy? Your joy is still there, honey. Nothing Emma did change that. You're still having a baby. You're still going to be a mother. Emma's pregnancy doesn't take anything away from yours." "But it did." "It took away my moment, my celebration, my one day to be the center of attention. It took away the congratulations that should have been mine alone, the excitement that should have been focused on my miracle." "Mom, I need you to understand that what Emma did was hurtful," I said. "I need you to acknowledge that. I think you're being too sensitive," my mother said. "Emma loves you. She would never intentionally hurt you, but she did hurt me," I said. "Intentionally or not, she hurt me." "Then you need to forgive her," my mother said firmly. "She's your sister and family forgives each other." Family forgives each other, the rule that had governed my entire life. No matter what Emma did, no matter how selfish or thoughtless her behavior, I was expected to forgive, to understand, to be the bigger person. What if I don't want to forgive her this time? I asked quietly. The silence on the other end was telling. My mother didn't know how to respond to a Sylvia who wasn't automatically compliant, who wasn't rushing to smooth things over. "I think you need to think about what's really important here," she said finally. Emma is your sister. She's going to be the aunt to your baby. Do you really want to damage that relationship over a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding. That's what my pain had been reduced to, a misunderstanding that I was too sensitive to handle properly. I have to go, I said. Mark's calling me for dinner. Sylvia, please think about what I've said. Emma needs her sister right now. She needs your support. What about what I need? I asked. You need to be the bigger person, my mother said. You've always been so good at that. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. Mark appeared in the doorway, concern written across his face. How did it go? He asked. Emma's upset I'm too sensitive and I need to be the bigger person, I said. The usual. Mark sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. You know what I think? What? I think it's time you stopped being the bigger person and started being the person who matters just as much as everyone else. His words hit me like a revelation. When had I stopped mattering? When had my feelings become less important than Emma's? When had keeping the peace become more valuable than standing up for myself? I'm tired, I said softly. I'm tired of always being the one who has to understand, who has to forgive, who has to make allowances. Then stop, Mark said simply. Stop being the bigger person. Stop making allowances. Stop forgiving people who aren't sorry. But they're my family, and you're their family too. You matter just as much as Emma does. Your feelings matter just as much as hers. For the first time in my life, I let myself believe that might be true. I mattered. My feelings mattered. My pregnancy mattered just as much as Emma's. And soon, very soon, I was going to prove it in a way that would change everything. Dr. Martinez's office always smelled like antiseptic and hope. I'd been here so many times over the past 3 years that the nurses knew me by name, knew my coffee order, knew the exact look on my face that meant bad news. But today was different. Today I was here for my routine pregnancy checkup, carrying the secret that would change everything. How are you feeling about everything? Dr. Martinez asked as she prepared the ultrasound equipment. She was a kind woman in her 50s who had guided me through the darkest moments of my fertility journey. After all you've been through, I imagine this pregnancy feels pretty miraculous. It does, I said, settling back on the examination table. Though I have to admit, I'm terrified something will go wrong. That's completely normal, she said, squeezing gel onto my belly. After pregnancy loss, it's natural to feel anxious. But everything looks perfect so far. The ultrasound wand moved across my skin, and suddenly there they were, 2 tiny forms on the screen, hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Baby A and Baby B. The doctor had labeled them during my last visit. My twins, there's Baby A, Dr. Martinez sighed, pointing to the screen. Strong heartbeat, good growth. And there's Baby B doing beautifully as well. I watched the screen mesmerized. After 3 years of empty wombs and broken dreams, seeing 2 healthy babies felt like witnessing a miracle. But more than that, it felt like holding a secret weapon. Doctor, I said carefully, I haven't told my family about the twins yet. Is that ... is that okay? She looked at me with understanding eyes. Of course it's okay. This is your pregnancy, your timeline. You can share information when you're ready. It's just that my sister announced her pregnancy at my baby shower last week, and I ... I trailed off, not sure how to explain the complicated family dynamics. Ah, Dr. Martinez said, her expression softening. That must have been difficult. She doesn't know about the twins, I said. Nobody does except my husband and me. That's perfectly fine, she said. Some parents wait until the anatomy scan to share gender news. Others wait until birth. There's no rule that says you have to announce twins on any particular timeline. But this wasn't about waiting for the right medical moment. This was about strategy, about timing, about finally having something that would put me center stage in my own family. Are there any risks I should know about? I asked. With twins, I mean. Dr. Martinez sat down, her expression becoming more serious. Twin pregnancies do carry additional risks, she said. Higher chance of preterm labor, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia. You'll need more frequent monitoring and will want to keep a closer eye on both babies' growth. She handed me a folder of information. These are the things to watch for, the signs that would require immediate medical attention. But I want you to know that the vast majority of twin pregnancies result in healthy babies. I took the folder, my hands trembling slightly. After 3 years of pregnancy complications and losses, the idea of additional risks was terrifying. But it was also empowering. I was carrying not just one miracle, but two. Can I ask you something? I said as Dr. Martinez cleaned the gel from my belly. Is it normal to want to keep this secret for a while? She smiled. In my experience, there's no such thing as normal when it comes to pregnancy announcements. Some people share the news immediately, others wait months. Some people tell everyone at once, others tell one person at a time. The only thing that matters is what feels right for you. My sister thinks she's having the only grandchild, I said quietly. She doesn't know she's about to be upstaged. Ah, Dr. Martinez said with a knowing smile. Family dynamics can be complicated. But remember, this isn't a competition. Both babies are blessings. She was right, of course. This wasn't supposed to be a competition. But Emma had made it one the moment she announced her pregnancy at my shower. She turned my celebration into a rivalry, and now I was simply playing the game she'd started. When would be a good time to tell people? I asked. Medically, you're past the first trimester, so the risk of miscarriage is significantly lower. From a practical standpoint, you'll start showing more obviously in the coming weeks. And with twins, you'll likely show earlier and more dramatically than with a singleton pregnancy. More dramatically, the word sent a thrill through me. Emma was probably just starting to show, probably reveling in the attention her small bump was getting. But soon, very soon, I would be obviously pregnant with twins, and all eyes would turn to me. I think I'd like to wait a few more weeks, I said, until the family dinner next month. Dr. Martinez nodded. That sounds like a perfect plan. Just remember to take care of yourself in the meantime. Extra rest, proper nutrition, and don't hesitate to call if you have any concerns. As I drove home, the folder of twin pregnancy information on the passenger seat, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The medical notes were sobering lists of potential complications, warning signs to watch for, the reality that carrying twins was more complex than a singleton pregnancy. But beneath the anxiety was something else, anticipation. For the first time in my life, I had news that would overshadow anything Emma could offer. She thought she was special because she was pregnant. She had no idea that I was carrying 2 babies, 2 heartbeats, 2 miracles, 2 grandchildren instead of her. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 3 years of struggle, after multiple fertility treatments and heartbreaking losses, my body had finally done something that Emma's couldn't match. She might have gotten pregnant easily, accidentally even, but I was the one carrying twins. Mark was waiting when I got home, his face immediately shifting to concern when he saw the medical folder in my hands. Everything okay? He asked. Everything's perfect, I said, showing him the new ultrasound photos. Look at them, Mark. They're both growing perfectly. He studied the images, his face soft with wonder. I still can't believe it, he said. After everything we went through, now we're having twins. Dr. Martinez says we'll need more monitoring, more precautions, I said, handing him the information packet. Twin pregnancies have more risks. Mark read through the materials, his expression growing serious. Are you worried? A little, I admitted. But mostly I'm excited. And I'm excited about something else too. What? I've decided when I want to tell everyone about the twins, I said. The family dinner next month, Mom's birthday dinner. Mark raised an eyebrow. That's 3 weeks away. Emma will probably be showing by then, getting all the attention for her pregnancy. Exactly, I said with a smile. She'd be riding high on being the pregnant one, the center of attention. And then I'll announce that I'm not just pregnant, I'm having twins. Mark was quiet for a moment, studying my face. This isn't really about the babies, is it? He said finally, this is about Emma, maybe, I said. But is that so wrong? For once in my life, I want to have the bigger news. I want to be the one everyone's excited about. You don't have to compete with Emma, Mark said gently. You don't have to prove anything, don't I? I asked. My whole life, Emma has been the special one, the exciting one, the one with the dramatic stories and the big moments. For once, I want that to be me. Mark sat down beside me on the couch, taking my hands in his. You are special, he said. You've always been special. You don't need twins to prove that, but I do need them to show it, I said. I need one moment where everyone looks at me instead of Emma, where I'm the one with the amazing news, instead of the supporting character in her story. And then what? Mark asked. After you've upstaged Emma, after you've had your moment in the spotlight, then what? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on the announcement, on the moment of triumph, that I hadn't considered what would come after. I don't know, I said honestly. I just know that for 32 years, I've been the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who steps aside to let Emma shine. Just once, I want to be the one who shines brighter. Mark squeezed my hands. Okay, he said. If this is what you need, then we'll do it. But promise me something. What? Promise me that after you've had your moment, after you've proven whatever you need to prove, you'll let this be about the babies, our babies, not about competition or rivalry or proving points. I promise, I said, and I meant it. This was about more than just upstaging Emma. It was about claiming my place in my own family, about demanding the respect and attention I'd never asked for before. The twins were my secret weapon, my ace in the hole, my guarantee that for once. In my life, I would be the one with the most exciting news in the room. 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks until I could reveal the truth that would change everything. The wedding planning magazine arrived in my mailbox 2 weeks after the baby shower incident, along with a note from Emma written in her looping handwriting. Since you're being weird about pregnancy stuff, maybe you can help me with this instead. Can't wait for you to be my maid of honor. XOXO. I stared at the magazine thick glossy, filled with impossibly perfect dresses and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my car payment. Emma had circled various pages with bright pink highlighter, adding exclamation points and heart doodles like a teenager planning prom. The assumption that I would be her maid of honor sat heavy in my stomach. Not an invitation, not a request, just the casual expectation that, of course, I would drop everything to help plan her perfect wedding while managing my own pregnancy. Mark found me at the kitchen table, flipping through the marked pages with growing irritation. Let me guess, he said, seeing the magazine. Emma needs something. She wants me to be her maid of honor, I said, showing him the note, and apparently help plan the wedding. Mark sat down across from me, his expression darkening as he read. Emma's note. She's calling you weird about pregnancy stuff. Because I told her I wanted to focus on my own pregnancy instead of sharing the experience with her, I said. Apparently that makes me weird. And now she wants you to plan her wedding while you're pregnant, Mark said. After hijacking your baby shower. I flipped through the magazine, seeing Emma's notes in the margins. Sylvia, what do you think of this dress? Should we do roses or peonies? Can you call this venue and get pricing? The word we appeared frequently, as if this wedding was a joint venture Rather than Emma's special day, my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Did you get the magazine? She asked without preamble, her voice bright with excitement. I got it, I said carefully. Isn't it exciting? James and I are thinking of fall wedding, maybe October. That gives us plenty of time to plan everything perfectly. Emma, about the maid of honor thing. Oh, I know, it's a lot to ask, she interrupted. Especially with you being pregnant and all, but you're my sister. I can't imagine anyone else standing next to me on my wedding day. The manipulation was subtle but effective. By framing it as an honor, as something special she was offering me, Emma made it difficult to refuse without seeming ungrateful. When are you thinking October? I asked, doing quick math in my head. Because I'll be pretty pregnant by then. I know. It'll be so cute, my pregnant maid of honor. We'll have to find you a special dress that accommodates your bump. My bump? Singular. She had no idea that by October, I'd be enormous with twins. Possibly on bed rest, definitely not in any shape to handle maid of honor duties. Emma, I'm not sure I'll be up for all the responsibilities. Don't worry about that, she said breezily. I've already thought it through. You won't have to do any of the physical stuff. Just help with planning and be there for moral support. Just help with planning. As if wedding planning was a casual, stress-free activity that wouldn't require hours of phone calls, vendor meetings, and decision-making. I was hoping you could start by calling some venues, Emma continued. I've marked the ones I like in the magazine. Just get pricing and availability for October dates. Emma, I work full-time, I said, and I'm pregnant. I don't really have time to call venues for you. It's just a few phone calls, she said, and I could hear the edge creeping into her voice. I thought you'd want to help me. Want to help? The phrase that had controlled me for years. Not would you be willing to help, or could you help if you have time, but the assumption that I wanted to spend my limited free time managing Emma's to-do list. I'll think about it, I said. What's to think about? Emma asked, her voice sharpening. You're my sister. This is my wedding. Of course you'll help. I'm just saying I need to think about whether I can take on maid of honor responsibilities while managing my pregnancy, I said. Sylvia, you're being really selfish lately, Emma said. First you don't want to share the pregnancy experience. Now you don't want to help with my wedding. What's wrong with you? Selfish? The word that always made me cave, always made me apologize and agree to whatever Emma wanted. I'm not being selfish, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm being realistic about my limitations. Your limitations? Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You're pregnant, not dying. Plenty of pregnant women are in weddings. Yes, but look, I get that you're hormonal and everything, but this is important to me. This is my wedding, Sylvia. My one special day. My one special day. The same phrase she could have used about my baby shower, but hadn't. I need to go, I said. I'll call you later. Fine, Emma said, her voice cold. But think about what I said. Family is supposed to support each other. After I hung up, I sat staring at the wedding magazine. The marked pages blurred as tears filled my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of frustration. Emma's casual dismissal of my pregnancy as just being hormonal, her assumption that I would drop everything to plan her wedding, her complete inability to see how her behavior affected other people, mark appeared in the doorway. That didn't sound like it went well. She wants me to call venues, I said, and she thinks I'm being selfish for not immediately agreeing to be her maid of honor. What did you tell her? That I'd think about it, I said. But honestly, Mark, I don't want to do it. I don't want to spend the next few months planning Emma's wedding while trying to manage a high-risk twin pregnancy. Then don't, he said simply. But she's my sister. And you're her sister, Mark pointed out. That should go both ways. I flipped through the magazine again, seeing the enormity of what Emma was asking. Venue research, dress shopping, vendor coordination, bridal parties, seating charts, all while I was carrying twins and dealing with the increased medical appointments and potential complications that came with a multiple pregnancy. You know, what the worst part is, I said. She has no idea how big I'm going to be by October. She's thinking one baby, one small bump that can be hidden under a bridesmaid dress. She doesn't know I'll probably be on modified bed rest by then. Are you going to tell her? Mark asked. Not yet, I said. Let her keep planning her perfect fall wedding with her pregnant maid of honor. Let her keep assuming I'll be available to handle all her demands. And then in a few weeks, when I announce the twins at Mom's birthday dinner, Emma will realize that her maid of honor might not be quite as available as she assumed. Mark smiled. You're really going to enjoy that moment, aren't you? Yes, I said, closing the magazine with a satisfying thud. I really am. For the first time since Emma had announced her pregnancy at my shower, I felt like I was holding the winning hand. She could make demands. She could call me selfish. She could assume I'd drop everything to make her wedding perfect, but she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know that by October I'd be carrying twins, probably too big and uncomfortable to stand for hours in a bridesmaid dress, possibly on bed rest by doctor's orders. Emma's perfect wedding plans were about to get very complicated. And for once, it wouldn't be my problem to fix. The restaurant receipt from Bella Vista would later serve as evidence of exactly how entitled Emma had become. $87 for her entree, wine, and dessert paid for by me, because somehow I'd become the family ATM whenever Emma decided she deserved something special. This place is perfect, Emma gushed as the hostess led us to our table. James and I came here for our anniversary. The food is incredible, but it's so expensive we can't really afford it regularly. She'd suggested Bella Vista for our monthly family dinner, knowing full well that Dad always insisted on splitting the check equally among the adult children. What she hadn't mentioned was that she'd already decided I'd be picking up her portion since she was saving for the wedding and baby expenses. Mom and Dad were already seated when we arrived, both beaming at Emma as she swept in wearing a flowing top that emphasized her small but noticeable bump. At 12 weeks, she was glowing with that early pregnancy radiance, her hand frequently moving to her stomach in a gesture that seemed calculated to remind everyone of her condition. You look wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said, standing to hug. Emma, how are you feeling? Amazing, Emma said, settling into her chair with a dramatic sigh. Though I've been so busy with wedding planning, it's exhausting trying to coordinate everything. I caught Mark's eye across the table. He'd heard all about Emma's exhausting wedding planning, which so far consisted of collecting magazine clippings and expecting me to do the actual work. How's the venue search going? Dad asked. Slowly, Emma said with a meaningful look at me. I've been so overwhelmed with everything that I haven't had time to make all the calls I need to make. The hint hung in the air like smoke. Dad turned to me expectantly. I've been pretty busy with work and my own pregnancy, I said carefully, but I'm sure Emma will find something perfect. Emma's smile faltered slightly. Of course I understand. You're busy. Though I did hope my sister might be more involved in helping plan my wedding. The guilt trip was expertly deployed. Mom immediately picked up the cue. Sylvia, surely you can help Emma with a few phone calls, she said. It's such an exciting time for her. It's an exciting time for both of us, I said quietly. We're both pregnant. Yes, but Emma's planning a wedding too, Dad pointed out. That's a lot of stress for someone in her condition. Someone in her condition. As if pregnancy was a disability. That excused Emma from handling her own responsibilities, while somehow not excusing me from helping her with them. The server appeared to take our orders, Emma immediately gravitating toward the most expensive items on the menu, the lobster tail, a bottle of sparkling cider, the chocolate souffle for dessert. When the server asked about the wine list, she made a show of declining because of the baby. I miss wine so much, she sighed dramatically. Pregnancy is such a sacrifice. I ordered a modest chicken dish and water, very aware that Emma's meal was going to cost more than Mark's and mine combined. So tell us about the wedding plans. Mom said once our orders were placed. Have you set a date? October 15th, Emma announced. A fall wedding will be so romantic, and Sylvia will look adorable as my maid of honor with her little bump. Little bump. If only she knew. That's wonderful, Dad said. Will you be up for maid of honor duties, Sylvia? Being pregnant and all? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. It depends on how I'm feeling. Oh, don't worry about that, Emma said breezily. I'm not expecting you to do anything too strenuous. Just be there for moral support and maybe help with some of the planning. Maybe help with some of the planning. The casual way she said it, as if it was no big deal, as if wedding planning was something that happened magically without effort. What kind of planning? Mark asked, his voice carefully neutral. Just the usual stuff, Emma said. Venue calls, vendor meetings, dress shopping. Nothing too complicated. Nothing too complicated. Months of coordination and decision-making dismissed as if it was an afternoon project. Have you considered hiring? A wedding planner? I suggested, if you're feeling overwhelmed. Emma laughed. Wedding planners are so expensive. Why would I pay someone to do what family can do for free? For free. There it was, the assumption that my time, my energy, my help came without cost because we were family. Besides, Emma continued, I want this to be personal. I want the people I love to be involved in making it special. The people she loved. The manipulation was subtle but effective by framing her demands as expressions of love. Emma made it difficult to refuse without seeming cold or uncaring. Our food arrived, and Emma's lobster tail looked as expensive as it was. She ate with obvious pleasure, frequently commenting on how delicious everything was and how glad she was that we'd come to such a nice place. This is exactly the kind of place I want for the wedding reception, she said. Elegant, but not stuffy. James is going to love this. Is James helping with the planning? Dad asked. Oh, you know how men are, Emma said with a laugh. He's hopeless at this kind of thing. He told me to just plan whatever I want and he'll show up. So James was off the hook for wedding planning, but I was expected to fill the gap. When are you due? Mom asked Emma, changing the subject. June 15th, Emma said, her hand moving to her stomach again. Right at the beginning of summer. Perfect timing. And you, Sylvia? Dad asked. End of May, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my own stomach where my twins were growing. How wonderful, Mom said. The babies will be so close in age. They'll practically be twins. Practically twins. The irony was almost too much to bear. Emma spent the rest of dinner dominating the conversation, talking about baby names and nursery themes and all the things she was excited about. Every few minutes, she'd remember to include me in the conversation, asking my opinion on topics she clearly wasn't really interested in hearing about. When the check came, Dad reached for his wallet. Out of habit, but Emma quickly intervened. Oh, Dad, don't worry about mine, she said. Sylvia said she'd cover me tonight since I'm saving for the wedding. I felt Mark stiffen beside me. I'd said no such thing, but now I was trapped. If I contradicted Emma in front of our parents, I'd look petty and selfish. If I paid for her expensive meal, I'd be enabling her entitlement. I don't remember agreeing to that, I said carefully. Oh, Emma said, her eyes widening with apparent confusion. I thought, when I mentioned how tight money was with the wedding expenses I thought you offered, maybe I misunderstood. The gaslighting was subtle but effective. By making it seem like a misunderstanding rather than an assumption, Emma put me in the position of either paying for her meal or looking like I was going back on an offer I'd never made. "It's fine," I said, pulling out my credit card. "I'll cover it. You're such a good sister," Emma said, beaming at me. "I'm so lucky to have you." As we left the restaurant, Emma linked her arm through mine. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "And thank you for understanding about the wedding planning. I know you'll figure out a way to help. Figure out a way to help." As if it was my responsibility to solve the problem of her overwhelming wedding plans. "Emma," I said, stopping on the sidewalk, "I need you to understand something. I might not be able to take on maid of honor responsibilities." "What do you mean?" she asked, her grip tightening on my arm. "I mean, pregnancy can be unpredictable. There might be complications, or I might be too uncomfortable, or..." "You're being dramatic again," Emma said, her voice sharpening. "It's just pregnancy, Sylvia. Women have been doing it for thousands of years. Just pregnancy. My high-risk twin pregnancy, my miracle after 3 years of struggle, reduced to just pregnancy. I'm just saying we should have a backup plan," I said. "The backup plan is that you'll be fine," Emma said firmly, "because you have to be fine. This is my wedding, Sylvia. I need you there." As we walked to our cars, Emma chattering about dress fittings and flower arrangements, I felt the familiar weight of her expectations settling on my shoulders. But this time, there was something else -anticipation in 2 weeks, at Mom's birthday. Dinner, Emma's perfect wedding plans were going to get a lot more complicated. Her assumption that I'd be available, willing, and able to be her maid of honor was about to be tested by a reality she couldn't imagine. I was carrying twins. And in 2 weeks, everyone would know. The expensive dinner receipt in my purse would remind me forever of the last time Emma got to make assumptions about my availability. After the twin announcement, everything would change, and I couldn't wait. The journal entry I wrote that night would later become one of my most treasured possessions. Not because it was beautifully written or profound, but because it marked the moment I finally saw my family dynamics clearly. May 15th, I paid for Emma's $87 dinner tonight because she manipulated the situation, and I was too afraid of looking selfish to call her out on it. I'm 34 years old, pregnant with twins, and I'm still letting my little sister control me with guilt and manipulation. When did I become so small? I sat in bed, my laptop open, having spent the last 2 hours researching narcissistic family dynamics and birth order psychology. What I'd found was both illuminating and heartbreaking page after page of articles that could have been written about my family, the golden child and the scapegoat. When families enable narcissistic behavior, breaking free from toxic family patterns, each article felt like someone had been watching my life and taking notes. Mark was already asleep beside me, exhausted from a long day at work and an even longer evening watching Emma perform for our parents. But I was wide awake, processing everything I'd learned. The golden child, according to the research, was often the family member who could do no wrong. They were praised for minimum effort, excused for bad behavior, and constantly centered in family discussions. The scapegoat, on the other hand, was held to impossible standards, blamed for family problems, and expected to manage everyone else's emotions. I thought about Emma's dramatic announcement at my baby shower, how our parents had immediately framed it as adding to the joy rather than recognizing it as inappropriate. I thought about tonight's dinner, how quickly they'd assumed I should help with Emma's wedding planning because she was overwhelmed. When had Emma ever been expected to help me with anything? When had she ever been asked to set aside her own needs for mine? I opened a new document and started writing, letting 3 decades of observations pour out. Emma has never had a job she didn't quit when it became inconvenient. She's never paid for her own car, her own insurance, her own phone bill. When she couldn't afford her apartment last year, Mom and Dad helped with rent. When I couldn't afford fertility treatments, They suggested we save up and try again later. Pattern was so clear once I allowed myself to see it. Emma's needs were always emergencies that required immediate family intervention. My needs were character-building opportunities that I was expected to handle independently. Emma's emotions are always valid and require immediate attention. When she's upset, the whole family mobilizes to comfort her. When I'm upset, I'm told I'm being too sensitive or dramatic. I thought about the phone call from my mother after the baby shower, how quickly she'd focused on Emma's hurt feelings rather than acknowledging my legitimate grievance. Emma's achievements are celebrated disproportionately. Her mediocre performance in the talent show was treated like a Grammy win. My academic scholarships and career success are acknowledged with polite congratulations and then forgotten. The research called it differential treatment when parents unconsciously favor one child over another, creating a dynamic where one child learns they're inherently more valuable while the other learns they must earn love through compliance and achievement. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love through compliance. Being the responsible one, the understanding one, though, one who never made waves or caused problems. And what had it gotten me? A sister who expected me to plan her wedding while managing a high-risk pregnancy, and parents who thought that was perfectly reasonable. The irony, I wrote, is that Emma thinks she's the victim in our relationship. She genuinely believes that. I'm selfish for not wanting to share my pregnancy journey with her, for not immediately agreeing to be her unpaid wedding planner. She's been so protected from consequences her entire life that she can't imagine why anyone would say no to her. But the most painful realization was about my own role in perpetuating the dynamic. Every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I'd apologized for having needs, every time I'd made myself smaller to accommodate Emma's demands, I'd reinforced the pattern. I taught Emma that my time wasn't valuable by always making it available to her. I taught her that my feelings didn't matter by always prioritizing hers. I taught her that she could take without giving by never asking for anything in return. The twins kicked inside me, a gentle reminder of what I was fighting for now. These babies would grow up watching how their mother allowed herself to be treated. They would learn about relationships and boundaries and self-worth from my example. I don't want my children to grow up thinking it's normal for one person to always give and another to always take. I don't want them to learn that love is conditional on compliance. I don't want them to think that family means accepting disrespect because that's just how she is. The research articles have been clear about one thing breaking these patterns. Required consistent boundary setting, even when it felt uncomfortable or selfish. It meant accepting that some people would be angry when you stopped enabling their behavior. Emma was going to be furious when she learned about the twins, not because she wasn't happy for me, but because she'd realized that her assumption about my availability was wrong. She'd spent weeks planning a wedding around the idea that I'd be her compliant helper, and the twin revelation would force her to face reality. The truth is, I'm looking forward to that moment, I wrote. Not because I want to hurt Emma, but because I want to see her face when she realizes that for once, I have bigger news than she does. For once, I'm the one who will be the center of attention. Was that petty? Probably. But after 32 years of being the supporting character in Emma's story, I thought I was entitled to one moment of triumph. Mark asked me what I want to happen after I announced the twins. The honest answer is that I want Emma to understand what it feels like to be upstaged. I want her to experience being the secondary story for once. I want her to know how it feels when your news isn't the most important thing in the room. But more than that, I wanted my family to see me differently. I wanted them to realize that I had my own life, my own achievements, my own miracles worth celebrating. I'm having twins, I wrote. After 3 years of struggle, after thousands of dollars in medical bills, after heartbreak and hope and determination, I'm carrying 2 babies. That's not a footnote to Emma's pregnancy story. That's a miracle that deserves its own celebration. I closed the laptop and settled back against my pillows, my hands resting on my growing belly. In 10 days, at Mom's birthday dinner, everything would change. Emma's perfect narrative about being the pregnant one, the special one, the center of attention, all of it would be disrupted by the truth she didn't know. The twins seemed to sense my anticipation moving restlessly inside me. Or maybe they were just reminding me that this wasn't really about Emma at all. This was about them, about the life we were building, about the family they would be born into. I wanted them to be born into a family where their mother stood up for herself, where boundaries were respected, where love wasn't conditional on compliance. Research had given me the knowledge. The twins had given me the motivation. Now, all I needed was the courage to use both. The baby registry I created that weekend was a masterpiece of strategic planning. To anyone who looked closely, the clues were all there. 2 cribs, 2 car seats, 2 of everything. But I was counting on Emma's self-absorption to keep her from noticing the details. I sat at my computer, carefully adding items to the registry. 1 crib in white, 1 in natural wood. 2 swaddle sets in different patterns, matching but distinct car seats. To the casual observer, it might look like I was being indecisive or creating options. To someone who was really paying attention, it would be obvious that I was preparing for twins. Emma wouldn't be paying attention. She never did when it came to anything that wasn't directly about her. "You're enjoying this way too much," Mark said, looking over my shoulder as I added a double stroller to the list. "Maybe," I admitted, "but can you blame me? After 32 years of being overlooked and finally going to have the biggest news in the room, what if she figures it out beforehand?" Mark asked. "What if someone else notices the registry and tells her?" "They won't," I said confidently. "Emma hasn't looked at my registry since the shower, and she won't look again until after her announcement. She's too busy basking in being the pregnant one to pay attention to what I'm actually doing." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Next Saturday was Mom's 58th birthday dinner, a tradition that had been going on for as long as I could remember. The whole family would be there: Mom, Dad, Emma, James, Mark, and me. Emma would inevitably spend the evening talking about her pregnancy, her wedding plans, her excitement about being the family's first grandchild producer. And then, when she was riding highest on her wave of attention, I would drop my bombshell. "I've been thinking about how to do it," I told Mark. "The announcement, I mean. And I want to wait until after dinner, when everyone's relaxed and Emma's had her fill of pregnancy talk. Then I'll suggest we take some photos to commemorate Mom's birthday, and I'll casually mention that we should get some pictures while Emma and I are both pregnant." Mark raised an eyebrow. "That seems subtle." "It is. And then, when everyone's focused on us being pregnant together, I'll say something like, 'Actually, there's something we haven't told you yet about our pregnancy.' And then I'll tell them about the twins." I could picture it perfectly, the moment of stunned silence, the explosion of excitement, the sudden shift of attention from Emma to me. Emma will realize that all her assumptions about my availability for wedding planning were based on incomplete information. Mark was quiet for a moment. "You know she's going to be upset," he said finally. "Good," I said, then caught myself. "I don't mean good that she be upset. I mean good that she finally understand what it feels like to be the one whose news isn't the most important thing in the room. And after that, after you've had your moment of triumph, after that, we focus on the babies," I said. "We focus on our family, our needs, our boundaries. We stop letting Emma's emotions control our decisions." The truth was, I'd been thinking beyond the announcement itself. The twins were my ace in the hole, but they were also my excuse. How could Emma expect me to be her maid of honor when I was carrying twins? How could anyone expect me to plan her wedding when I'd be dealing with a high-risk pregnancy? For the first time in my life, I had a legitimate reason to say no to Emma's demands that no one could argue with. I should probably prepare Mom and Dad, I mused. Let them know privately before the dinner so they're not completely shocked. That might be smart, Mark agreed. Give them time to process before Emma finds out. I called my mother the next morning during her usual coffee and newspaper time. Sylvia, honey, what a nice surprise, she said when she answered. How are you feeling? Actually, that's why I'm calling, I said. I have some news about the pregnancy that I wanted to share with you and Dad before Saturday. Oh my goodness, is everything okay? The worry in her voice was immediate and intense. Everything's perfect, I assured her quickly. Better than perfect, actually. Mom, we're having twins. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought. The call had dropped. Mom, are you there? Twins? She whispered, You're having twins? Yes, we found out a few weeks ago. We wanted to wait until we were further along to tell everyone. Oh, Sylvia, she breathed, and I could hear tears in her voice. Twins. After everything you and Mark went through, after all the struggles, twins. It was the reaction I'd been hoping for. Wonder, excitement, recognition that this was something special and miraculous. When were you planning to tell everyone else? She asked. Saturday night at your birthday dinner, I said. I thought it would be a nice way to celebrate. What about Emma? She asked carefully. Have you told her? No one knows except Mark. And me, and now you and Dad, I said. I wanted it to be a surprise. She's going to be so excited, Mom said. Having twins in the family, it's like a double blessing, but I could hear the slight hesitation in her voice, the unspoken concern about how Emma would react to being upstaged. My mother had spent decades managing Emma's emotions, smoothing over conflicts, making sure Emma never felt left out or overlooked. Mom, I said carefully, I need you to promise me something. What's that, honey? I need you to let this be my moment. When I announced the twins on Saturday, I need you to let me have the attention and excitement without immediately trying to include Emma or make sure she doesn't feel bad. The silence was longer this time. Of course, she said finally, but I could hear the effort it took. Of course it's your moment. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Twins. Promise me, Mom. Promise me you won't immediately start talking about how wonderful it is that Emma and I are pregnant together, or how the cousins will be close in age. Promise me you'll let this be about Mark and me and our babies. I promise, she said, and this time her voice was stronger. You deserve to have your moment, Sylvia. You've waited so long for this. After I hung up, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The plan was in motion now. In 5 days, my secret would be revealed and everything would change. I spent the rest of the week imagining different scenarios. Emma's face when she realized her assumptions about my pregnancy were wrong. The family's excitement about twins, the inevitable realization that I wouldn't be available to plan. Emma's wedding the way she'd expected. Mark found me on Friday night, making a list of potential responses to Emma's objections about the maid of honor situation. You're really prepared for battle, he observed. I have to be, I said. Emma's not going to take this well. She's going to argue that being pregnant with twins doesn't change my ability to be her maid of honor. And what will you say? The truth. That twin pregnancies are high risk, that I'll need more rest and medical supervision, that I can't commit to the physical and emotional demands of wedding planning while managing my own health. It was all true. Dr. Martinez had been clear about the increased risks and the need for careful monitoring. But it was also a convenient, medically sound excuse to finally say no to Emma's endless demands. One more day, I said, closing my notebook of preparations. One more day, and then everything changes. Mark kissed my forehead. Are you ready? I thought about the question seriously. Was I ready to upstage my sister? Was I ready to claim the spotlight I'd been denied for so long? Was I ready to deal with Emma's reaction and the family drama that would inevitably follow? Yes, I said finally. I'm ready. The twins kicked inside me as if they were ready too. Ready to be announced, ready to be celebrated, ready to change. The dynamics of a family that had overlooked their mother for far too long. Tomorrow night, everything would be different. Tomorrow night, for the first time in my life, I would be the one with the biggest news in the room. The blocked contact list on my phone showed Emma's number for the first time in our 32-year relationship. I stared at it for a long moment before confirming the action, my finger hovering over the screen as years of conditioning warred. With my newfound resolve, it had been 3 days since I told her I couldn't commit to being her maid of honor. And Emma's response had been swift and brutal. 17 text messages in 2 hours, ranging from hurt confusion to manipulative guilt-tripping to outright anger. I can't believe you're doing this to me. After everything I've done for you, you're ruining my wedding. Mom and Dad are going to be so disappointed. I thought you loved me. You're being so selfish. This is my one special day. How can you do this to your own sister? Each message had been designed to hit a different pressure point, to trigger the guilt and compliance that had controlled me for decades. And for the first few hours, it had worked. I'd found myself crafting apology texts, ready to cave and agree to whatever Emma wanted just to make her stop being upset. But then Mark had found me crying in the kitchen, phone in hand, preparing to send a message that started with, "I'm sorry, you're right. I was being selfish." "Stop," he'd said gently, taking the phone from my hands. "Read these messages as if they were sent to someone else. Read them as if Emma was treating a friend this way." I'd read them again, this time with emotional distance, and the manipulation had been stunning in its clarity. The way Emma had bounced between playing victim and assigning blame, the way she'd brought up our parents to increase pressure, the way she'd used phrases like "after everything I've done for you," when she'd never actually done anything for me that wasn't ultimately about serving her own needs. "She's emotionally blackmailing you," Mark had said, "and you don't have to accept it." So I'd blocked her number. For the first time in my life, I'd cut off Emma's access to my immediate attention and constant availability. The relief had been overwhelming. "How does it feel?" Mark asked, finding me in the living room with a cup of tea and a pregnancy book. "Quiet," I said. For the first time in weeks, my phone isn't buzzing with Emma's demands or complaints or guilt trips. "Do you feel guilty about it?" I considered the question honestly. "A little," I admitted. "But mostly I feel free. Like I can think clearly for the first time in forever." The block number had forced me to confront how much mental energy I'd been spending on managing Emma's emotions. How many times a day I'd check my phone, bracing for her latest crisis or demand. How much space in my brain had been occupied by anxiety about her reactions to my decisions. "Dr. Martinez called," Mark said, settling beside me on the couch. "She wants to schedule your next appointment. Apparently, twin pregnancies require more frequent monitoring after 16 weeks. 16 weeks. I was already showing more than Emma, my body expanding to accommodate 2 growing babies. The physical evidence of the twins was becoming harder to hide, which added urgency to tomorrow night's announcement. "Did she say anything about restrictions?" I asked. "She wants to talk." "About activity modification," Mark said carefully. "Nothing dramatic, but she mentioned that you might need to cut back on stress and physical demands as you get further along. Activity modification. The perfect medical backing for my decision to step back from Emma's wedding demands. Not an excuse or a manipulation, but a genuine health concern that took precedence over my sister's convenience. "I've been thinking about what I'm going to say tomorrow night," I said. "When Emma inevitably confronts me about the maid of honor thing in front of everyone, what's your plan?" "The truth," I said simply. "That carrying twins is more complicated. then a single pregnancy, that my doctor has recommended reducing stress and physical demands, and that I need to prioritize my health and my baby's health over wedding planning. It was a response Emma couldn't argue with without looking callous. She couldn't publicly insist that her wedding was more important than my medical needs without revealing exactly how selfish she'd become. And if she tries to guilt trip you in front of everyone, I'm going to stay calm and refuse to engage, I said. I'm not going to defend my decision or justify my boundaries. I'm just going to state facts and let them speak for themselves. The old Sylvia would have been terrified of Emma's reaction, would have spent hours preparing elaborate explanations and apologies. But the new Sylvia, the one carrying twins, the one who'd spent weeks researching family dynamics, the one who'd finally seen the manipulation for what it was remarkably calm about the prospect of Emma's anger. She can be upset, I said, more to myself than to Mark. She's allowed to be disappointed that I can't be her maid of honor. But she's not allowed to make her emotions my responsibility to fix. Mark smiled. I'm proud of you, he said. This is the strongest I've ever seen you when it comes to Emma. It's the twins, I said, my hands moving to my growing belly. Knowing I'm carrying them, knowing they're going to watch how I let people treat me, it's given me perspective I never had before. The blocked number on my phone represented more than just cutting off Emma's manipulation tactics. It represented a fundamental shift in how I saw our relationship, how I understood my own worth, how I claimed my right to set boundaries without endless justification. What do you think she's doing right now? Mark asked, since she can't text you. Probably calling Mom, I said, trying to get her to intervene, to talk sense into me, to make me see how unreasonable I'm being. Are you worried about that? Not really, I said, surprising myself with how true that was. Mom knows about the twins now. She understands that. This pregnancy is different, more complicated. Even if she wants to smooth things over with Emma, she can't argue with medical necessity. The phone rang as if summoned by our conversation. Mom's name appeared on the screen. Speak of the devil, Mark murmured. I answered the call, bracing myself for the familiar role of family mediator that I was no longer willing to play. Hi, Mom. Sylvia, honey, Emma called me very upset. She said you blocked her number and that you're refusing to be her maid of honor. That's true, I said calmly. I told Emma I couldn't commit to maid of honor responsibilities, and when she responded with hours of manipulative text messages, I decided to block her number temporarily. She's just stressed about the wedding, Mom said, immediately jumping to Emma's defense. You know how she gets when she's overwhelmed? I know how she gets, I agreed, and I've decided I don't have to accept being treated badly just because Emma is stressed. But honey, she's your sister. Surely you can work this out. There's nothing to work out, I said. I've made a decision based on my health needs and my capacity. Emma can either accept that decision or not, but it's not open for negotiation. The silence on Mom's end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. The twins, she said finally. This is about the twins, isn't it? Partly, I said. Carrying twins is more complicated than a singleton pregnancy. My doctor is already talking about activity restrictions. I can't commit to the physical and emotional demands of wedding planning when I need to prioritize my health. Emma doesn't know about the twins yet, Mom said carefully. No, she doesn't. She'll find out tomorrow night with everyone else. And you don't think you should tell her privately first, so she understands why you can't be her maid of honor? I considered the question. The old Sylvia would have done exactly that, would have called Emma immediately to explain, to soften the blow, to manage her emotions and minimize her disappointment. No, I said finally. I don't owe Emma a private explanation for my medical decisions. She understands tomorrow night when I announce the twins, and she can adjust her expectations accordingly. Sylvia, Mom said gently, I know Emma can be challenging, but she loves you. She's just scared about the wedding and overwhelmed by everything. And I love her too, I said. But love doesn't mean accepting manipulation or sacrificing my well-being for her convenience. The twins deserve a mother who models healthy boundaries. After I hung up, I felt the same sense of quiet strength that had followed blocking Emma's number. I was learning to trust my own judgment, to value my own needs, to stop automatically deferring to everyone else's emotions. One more day, I said to Mark. One more day, and then everything comes out in the open. Are you ready for the fallout? I thought about Emma's likely reaction to learning about the twins, the shock, the anger at being kept out of the loop, the realization that her assumptions about my availability had been completely wrong. I'm ready, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm ready to let Emma deal with her own emotions while I focus on what's actually important. The twins kicked inside me as if they approved of their mother's newfound backbone. Tomorrow night, they would finally be announced to the world. Tomorrow night, everything would change, and I was no longer afraid of that change. I was looking forward to it. The ultrasound video on my phone would later become one of my most treasured possessions, not just because it showed my twins moving and growing, but because it captured the moment everything changed in my family. Mom, single quotes, S birthday dinner had gone. Exactly as predicted. Emma had dominated the conversation, talking endlessly about her pregnancy symptoms, her cravings, her excitement about becoming a mother. She'd made sure everyone knew she was now 13 weeks along, glowing with that early pregnancy radiance that made her the center of attention. I just feel so blessed, she'd said during dessert, her hand resting on her small but noticeable bump. I never imagined I could love someone I haven't even met yet. The irony wasn't lost on me. I've been loving my unborn children for weeks longer than Emma had known hers existed, but her feelings were the ones being celebrated and discussed. Have you started thinking about nursery themes? Dad had asked, completely absorbed in Emma's pregnancy journey. Oh yes, Emma had gushed. I'm thinking something gender neutral since we don't know yet. Maybe a woodland theme with foxes and deer, so sweet and innocent. I'd listened to it all with growing anticipation, knowing that in a few minutes, Emma's position as the family's pregnancy star was about to be dramatically challenged. Should we take some photos? One suggested as we moved to the living room to commemorate Mom's birthday. Great idea, Mom said, already reaching for her camera. Emma, come stand by me. We need to get pictures of you while you're pregnant. Emma preened as she posed for photos, making sure her bump was visible, her smile radiant. She was in her element, the glowing, expectant mother receiving all the attention and admiration she'd always craved. Sylvia, get in the photo too, Dad called, both my pregnant daughters. I joined the group, standing slightly to Emma's side. At 17 weeks with twins, my bump was noticeably larger than Emma's, but she was too focused on herself to pay attention. This is so special, Mom said, snapping photos. Both of you pregnant at the same time. The babies will practically grow up as siblings. They'll be the best of friends, Emma added, just like Sylvia and I are. Just like Sylvia and I are. The statement hung in the air, weighted with irony, given that I'd blocked Emma's number just days ago. Actually, I said, my heart starting to race. There's something Mark and I haven't told you yet about our pregnancy. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at me, and I could see Emma's smile falter slightly as attention shifted away from her. What do you mean? Mom asked, though her eyes were already bright with anticipation. She'd kept my secret perfectly. Letting me have this moment, I pulled out my phone and opened the ultrasound video from my last appointment. We wanted to wait until we were further along to share this, but I paused, looking around the room at my family. We're having twins. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's mouth fell open, James looked stunned. Mark squeezed my hand, his face radiating pride and love. And Emma looked like she'd been slapped. Twins? Dad whispered. You're having twins? I hit play on the ultrasound video, and suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of two tiny heartbeats, the grainy black and white image showing two babies moving inside me. Baby A and baby B, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Due in late May. The explosion of excitement was everything I dreamed of. Mom burst into tears. Dad jumped up to hug me. James congratulated Mark with genuine enthusiasm. For the first time in my life, I was the center of a family celebration, the one with the miraculous news that overshadowed everything else. Twins. Mom kept repeating, holding my face in her hands. After everything you went through, after all the struggles, twins. It's like a double miracle. This is incredible, Dad said, his voice choked with emotion. Twins in the family. I can't believe it. But through the celebration, I was acutely aware of Emma's silence. She stood frozen in place, her smile plastered on, but her eyes cold, with something that looked suspiciously like rage. How long have you known? She asked finally, her voice carefully controlled. A few weeks, I said honestly. We wanted to wait until we were past the critical period to tell everyone. A few weeks, Emma repeated slowly. So you knew when you told me you couldn't be my maid of honor. The room went quiet again, the celebration suddenly charged with tension. The two things aren't related, I said carefully. I couldn't commit to maid of honor responsibilities, regardless of whether I was having one baby or two. But you didn't tell me, Emma said, her voice rising slightly. You let me think you were just being difficult about helping with the wedding when really you were keeping this huge secret. Emma, Mom said gently, this is wonderful news. We should be celebrating. Of course it's wonderful news, Emma said quickly, her media training kicking in. I'm thrilled for Sylvia. It's just ... surprising that she didn't share this with her sister. The guilt trip was subtle but effective. By framing my secrecy as a betrayal rather than a personal choice, Emma was trying to make my moment about her hurt feelings. We didn't tell anyone, Mark said firmly. We wanted to surprise the whole family at once. But I'm not just anyone, Emma said, her mask slipping slightly. I'm her sister. I'm pregnant too. I thought we were sharing this journey together. Sharing this journey together, the phrase that had haunted me since the baby shower, the assumption that my pregnancy existed primarily to complement Emma's experience. We each have our own journeys, I said calmly. Both equally important, both worth celebrating separately. Emma's eyes flashed with something that looked like betrayal. For 32 years, she'd been the one with the biggest news, the most dramatic stories, the most exciting announcements. She'd built her identity around being special, being the center of attention, being the family member everyone rallied around. And now, suddenly, she was secondary. Her one baby paled in comparison to my two. Her straightforward pregnancy couldn't compete with my miracle twins after years of fertility struggles. This changes things, she said quietly, and I could see her mental calculations working. If you're having twins, you definitely can't be my maid of honor. No, I agreed. I can't. I'll need to find someone else. I'll need to completely restructure my wedding party. Her voice was getting tighter, more stressed. All my plans were based on you being available to help. I understand that's disappointing, I said. But these are the circumstances we're dealing with. Disappointing, Emma repeated, her voice sharp. That's what you call completely destroying my wedding plans? Emma, Dad said, his voice carrying warning. That's enough. But Emma was past the point of caring about appearances. The rage she'd been suppressing since the moment I announced the twins was starting to leak out. Do you have any idea what this means for me? She asked, her voice getting louder. I've been planning this wedding for months, counting on you to be there, to help me, to support me. And now I find out you've been lying to me about something this huge? I wasn't lying, I said, my own voice getting firmer. I was protecting my privacy and my pregnancy until I was ready to share. By letting me make plans based on false information, Emma shot back. By letting me assume you could handle normal maid of honor duties when you knew you were having a high-risk pregnancy. That's exactly why I couldn't commit, I said. I knew there would be complications and limitations, regardless of whether you knew the details. But you could have told me, Emma said, and now there were tears in her voice. You could have trusted me with this. Instead, you kept this huge secret and let me look like an idiot for expecting my sister to be there for my wedding. The room was electric with tension. Mom and Dad looked stricken, caught between wanting to celebrate my news and wanting to manage Emma's emotional crisis. James looked uncomfortable, probably wondering how his simple family birthday dinner had devolved into this confrontation. Emma, I said carefully, I understand you're upset about the wedding implications, but right now we're announcing our twins. Can we focus on that for the moment and deal with wedding logistics later? It was a reasonable request, but Emma was beyond reason. Focus on your twins, she said bitterly. Of course, everything has to be about you and your special twins and your miracle pregnancy. God forbid we acknowledge that your decisions affect other people. That's enough, Mark said, his voice hard. Sylvia just shared incredible news with the family, and you're making it about yourself. I'm making it about myself. Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. She's been keeping this secret for weeks, letting me make plans based on incomplete information, and I'm the one making it about myself. You're being unreasonable, Dad said firmly. This is wonderful news, and you're spoiling it with your reaction. Emma looked around the room, seeing disapproval on every face, realizing that her tantrum was making her look petty and selfish in front of everyone. Fine, she said, her voice cold and controlled again. Congratulations, Sylvia. I'm very happy for you and your twins. I hope you have a wonderful pregnancy. But her eyes said something entirely different. Her eyes said that this was war. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Emma pulled me aside in the hallway. I hope you're happy, she said quietly, her voice laced with venom. You got what you wanted. You upstaged me, you ruined my wedding plans, and you made sure everyone knows your pregnancy is more special than mine. That wasn't my intention, I said. Wasn't it? Emma asked. You couldn't stand that I was getting attention for once, so you had to come up with something bigger and better. Emma, that's not save it, she said. I know exactly what this is, but don't think for a second that this changes anything between us. I'm still your sister, and I still expect you to act like it. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the hallway with the echo of her threat hanging in the air. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of Emma's anger. For the first time, her disappointment wasn't my emergency to fix. I was having twins. I'd finally had my moment in the spotlight. And no matter how angry Emma was, she couldn't take that away from me. The war she'd declared was one I was finally ready to fight. The broken picture frame would serve as evidence of exactly how far Emma's sense of entitlement had spiraled. It was our family Christmas photo from 2 years ago, the one where Emma stood in the center, arms spread wide, radiant smile capturing the camera's attention while the rest of us arranged ourselves. Around her like supporting players in her personal drama dot, she threw it at me 3 days after the twin announcement. During what would become known in our family as Emma's meltdown, I'd been expecting some kind of retaliation ever since our tense exchange at Mom's birthday dinner. Emma had always been a poor loser, but this was the first time in our lives that she'd lost so completely, so publicly, so dramatically. The phone calls had started the morning after the dinner. 17 missed calls from Emma's number, which I'd unblocked out of curiosity, only to immediately regret the decision. Pick up the phone, the first voicemail had said. "We need to talk about this ridiculous situation you've created." "Call me back," said the second. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, but you're making it very difficult." By the fifth voicemail, Emma's mask of reasonableness had slipped entirely. "Fine, ignore me. But you can't ignore the fact that you've completely screwed over my wedding. I hope you're happy with yourself." I blocked her number again, but Emma was nothing if not resourceful. She'd called from James's phone, from work, from friends' numbers. When those stopped working, she'd moved on to social media, sending long, rambling messages about family loyalty and sisterly duty, and how disappointed she was in my selfishness. When digital harassment failed to get the response she wanted, Emma had escalated to showing up at my house. I'd been in the nursery, one of the spare bedrooms we'd started converting into a baby room, when Mark called up the stairs that Emma was at the front door. "Don't answer it," I called back, but I could already hear Emma's voice getting louder, more insistent. "I know you're in there, Sylvia," she was shouting. "We're going to talk about this whether you want to or not." Mark had opened the door, against my wishes, probably hoping that a calm conversation might diffuse the situation. Instead, Emma had pushed past him and stormed into the house like an avenging angel. "Where is she?" Emma had demanded, her voice echoing through the house. "Where's my lying, manipulative sister?" I'd come downstairs to find Emma pacing in our living room, her face flushed with anger, her hands shaking with rage. "Emma, you need to calm down," I'd said, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "Calm down?" She'd laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You want me to calm down? After what you've done to me?" "I haven't done anything to you," I'd said. "I announced my pregnancy news at a family dinner. That's not an attack on you." "Don't," Emma had snapped. "Don't you dare pretend this wasn't calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing when you kept the twins a secret." "I kept the twins a secret to protect my privacy and my pregnancy," I'd said. "It had nothing to do with you." "Everything has to do with me," Emma had shouted, her voice rising to a pitch that made Mark step protectively closer to me. "I'm your sister. I'm planning a wedding. I'm pregnant too. You don't get to make major life decisions in a vacuum." The entitlement in her voice had been breathtaking. The idea that my pregnancy decisions should be made with Emma's convenience in mind, that my medical information was somehow her property, that my choices required her approval. "Emma, you're being unreasonable," Mark had said, his voice calm but firm. "Sylvia doesn't owe you access to private medical information." "Stay out of this," Emma had snarled, turning on Mark with venom I'd never seen before. "This is between me and my sister." "Actually, it's between me and my wife," Mark had replied, his protective instincts clearly activated. "And you're in our home uninvited, shouting at a pregnant woman. I think it's time for you to leave." That's when Emma had grabbed the picture frame from the side table and hurled it at me. The frame had shattered against the wall just inches from my head. Glass spraying across the floor, the photo of our perfect family Christmas floating down, like a broken promise. "There," Emma had said, her voice deadly quiet. "That's what you've done to our family. Shattered it. All because you couldn't stand that I was finally getting some attention." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark and I stared at Emma in shock while she stood there breathing hard, her chest heaving with rage and exertion. "Emma," I said, slowly, my voice shaking, "you just threw something at me." "At my pregnant belly." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. For a moment, her face registered shock, as if she was seeing herself clearly for the first time. But then the defensiveness kicked in. "I wasn't aiming at you," she said quickly. "I was just ... I was upset. You've ruined everything, Sylvia. My wedding, my pregnancy announcement, my relationship with our parents, everything." "How exactly have I ruined your relationship with our parents?" I asked, genuinely confused. "They can't stop talking about your twins," Emma said, her voice cracking. Every conversation now is about your high-risk pregnancy and your miracle babies and how special it is that you're having two after all your fertility struggles. Nobody cares about my pregnancy anymore. The truth was finally out. This wasn't really about the maid of honor situation or the wedding planning. This was about Emma's desperate need to be the center of attention, her inability to share the spotlight, her rage at being upstaged for the first time in her life. Emma, mom and dad are excited about both pregnancies, I said gently. There's room for everyone to be special. No, there isn't, Emma said, tears streaming down her face now. There's never been room for both of us to be special. It's always been about you being the responsible one and me being the fun one, or you being the smart one and me being the pretty one. But now you get to be the smart one and the one with the special pregnancy, and what do I have left? The breakdown was painful to witness. Emma's carefully constructed identity as the golden child, the special one, the center of attention, was crumbling in real time. You have your own pregnancy, I said. Your own baby, your own joy, your own miracle. It's not a miracle anymore, Emma sobbed. Not compared to twins. Not compared to your story of struggle and triumph. And just the sister who got pregnant easily while you're the hero who overcame fertility issues to have twins. Mark had quietly moved to start cleaning up the broken glass, but I could see him listening to every word, his face tight with disapproval. At Emma's behavior, Emma, this isn't a competition, I said. We can both be pregnant. We can both be happy. We can both be celebrated. Can we? Emma asked, her voice bitter. Because it sure doesn't feel that way. It feels like you planned this whole thing to make sure you got the biggest reaction, the most attention, the most excitement. I planned to share my news with my family when I was ready, I said firmly. That's all. When you were ready, Emma repeated, which happened to be right when I was getting comfortable being the pregnant one in the family. The honesty was startling. Emma was actually admitting that she'd enjoyed being the only pregnant daughter, the only one carrying a grandchild, the only one with pregnancy-related attention. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, but I can't change the timing of my pregnancy or my decision to announce it. You could have told me privately first, Emma said, grasping for some moral high ground. You could have given me time to adjust my expectations. Why? I asked. Why did you need advance notice of my medical information? Because I'm your sister, Emma exploded again. Because I needed to know that you weren't going to be available for my wedding. Because I had a right to plan accordingly. You didn't have a right to my private information, I said, my voice getting firmer. You had an obligation to ask about my availability instead of assuming it. I shouldn't have had to ask, Emma said. Family helps family. That's how it's always worked. Family helps family when they're asked and when they're able, I corrected. Not when they're commanded and guilted into compliance. Emma stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. This version of me, the one who pushed back, who set boundaries, who refused to automatically defer to her needs, was clearly something she'd never encountered before. I don't know who you are anymore, she said finally. The sister I know would never treat me this way. The sister you knew was trained to put your needs before her own, I said. That sister was exhausted from always being the one who had to understand, who had to compromise, who had to make allowances. So this is about revenge, Emma said, seizing on what she thought was an admission. You're punishing me for all the times you felt overlooked. This is about balance, I said. This is about me finally claiming my right to have needs and boundaries and priorities that don't revolve around managing your emotions. Emma looked around the room wildly, as if searching for support that wasn't there. Mark was clearly on my side. The broken glass at our feet was evidence of her own inappropriate behavior, and her arguments were sounding increasingly desperate, even to her own ears. Fine, she said finally, her voice cold and defeated. If this is how you want to play it, then fine. But don't expect me to just pretend everything is normal between us. I don't expect anything from you, I said honestly, except that you respect my boundaries and my decisions. Your boundaries? Emma laughed bitterly. Your decisions, your pregnancy. Your twins. Everything's about you now, isn't it? For the first time in 32 years, yes, I said. Something is about me. Emma stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing this new reality where it wasn't going to cave, wasn't going to apologize, wasn't going to prioritize her feelings over my own needs. You'll regret this, she said finally. When your twins are born and you need help, when your marriage gets strained by having 2 babies, when you realize how hard this is going to be, you'll regret pushing away the people who love you. The people who love me will support my decisions even when they're disappointed by them, I said. The people who love me won't throw things at my pregnant belly when they don't get their way. The guilt finally hit Emma's face, a flush of shame that she quickly tried to hide. I didn't mean to, she started. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant to scare me, to intimidate me, to make me back down. That's what you've always done when you don't get your way, escalate until everyone gives in just to restore peace. That's not true, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. It is true, I said, and I'm done participating in that dynamic. Emma looked around the room one more time, taking in the broken glass, Mark's protective stance, my unwavering, calm in the face of her tantrum. This isn't over, she said finally. Yes, it is, I replied. This version of our relationship where I sacrifice my needs for your wants, where I manage your emotions at the expense of my own, that's over. After Emma left, Mark and I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the broken glass he'd swept into a pile. Are you okay? He asked finally. I'm better than okay, I said, surprised by how true it was. For the first time in my life, I stood up to Emma and didn't back down. She threw something at you, Mark said, his voice tight with anger. She could have hurt you or the babies, but she didn't, I said. And now she knows that I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm not the sister who will absorb her anger and make excuses for her behavior. Mark reached over and took my hand. I'm proud of you, he said. It couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But it was necessary. The twins deserve a mother who models healthy boundaries, who doesn't teach them that love means accepting abuse. As we cleaned up the last of the broken glass, I realized that Emma had actually done me a favor. Her meltdown had revealed the true nature of our relationship dynamic, had shown me exactly what I'd been enabling all these years. The broken picture frame would go in the trash, but the lesson would stay with me forever. I was done being the scapegoat in my own family. I was done making myself smaller to accommodate Emma's need to feel bigger. The twins moved inside me, as if they approved of their mother's newfound strength. And for the first time since Emma's pregnancy announcement at my baby shower, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. Let Emma be angry. Let her be disappointed. Let her struggle with the reality that her sister was no longer available to manage her emotions and solve her problems. I had bigger things to worry about now. I was growing 2 human beings, and they deserved a mother who fought for what was right instead of what was easy. The hospital bracelet from St. Mary's emergency department would become a stark reminder of how far Emma's behavior had escalated. Patient Sylvia Allen, date June 3rd, reason for visit, pregnancy-related stress, threatened preterm labor, dotted. Had been 2 weeks since Emma's meltdown in my living room. 2 weeks of an uneasy ceasefire that I should have known wouldn't last. Emma had apparently been stewing in her rage, plotting some kind of retaliation that would force me back into compliance. She'd chosen her moment carefully. Mark was traveling for work, I was alone at home, and I was just entering my 24th. Weak of pregnancy far enough along that the twins were viable, but early enough that premature labor would be dangerous. The banging on my door had started at 6 a.m., relentless and angry. When I'd ignored it, Emma had started shouting from the front yard, her voice carrying through the neighborhood. "I know you're in there, Sylvia. Come out here and face me like an adult." I'd called the police first, then my mother, but Emma had escalated before either could arrive. "You think you're so special with your twins," she'd screamed loud enough for the entire street to hear. "You think you can just cut me out of your life and there won't be consequences?" The stress had hit me like a physical blow. My heart rate had spiked, my hands had started shaking, and then the cramping had begun sharp, rhythmic contractions that sent terror shooting through my entire body. By the time the police arrived, I was doubled over in pain, calling 911 from my kitchen floor while Emma continued her tirade outside. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the property," I'd heard the officer say through my open window. "That's my sister in there," Emma had replied, her voice still raised but slightly more controlled now that authorities were present. "We're having a family disagreement." A family disagreement. As if her harassment and intimidation was just a normal sibling squabble. The ambulance had arrived as the police were still trying to get Emma to leave. I'd been loaded onto a stretcher while she watched from the sidewalk, her face a mixture of shock and what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez had been grave but reassuring. The contractions had stopped with medication and rest, but the message was clear. My body was responding to stress in ways that could endanger the twins. Pregnancy-related stress can trigger preterm labor, she'd explained to Mark, who had caught the first flight home and arrived at the hospital wild-eyed with worry. At 24 weeks, the babies would survive if born, but they'd face significant complications. What kind of stress? Mark had asked, though we both knew the answer. Emotional stress, physical stress, any kind of sustained pressure on the mother's system, Dr. Martinez had said. Twin pregnancies are already more fragile. Adding external stressors can push things over the edge. Mark's face had gone white with rage. "This is Emma's fault," he'd said quietly. "She did this." Dr. Martinez had looked between us with understanding eyes. "Family stress during pregnancy is unfortunately common," she'd said. "But you need to eliminate the source of stress if possible, for the baby's sake." Eliminate the source of stress? The doctor's words had been diplomatic, but the message was clear. Emma's behavior was a threat to my pregnancy and my baby's health. "What does that mean, practically?" I'd asked. "It means no contact with anyone who causes you significant emotional distress," Dr. Martinez had said firmly. "It means protecting yourself and your pregnancy from any situation that triggers your fight or flight response. It means putting your health and your baby's health above all other considerations." The hospital bracelet had been my badge of courage and my proof of Emma's destructiveness. When my parents had arrived at the hospital, full of concern and confusion, I'd shown them the bracelet and explained exactly what had led to my emergency room visit. "Emma was harassing me at my house," I'd said, too tired for diplomacy. "She was screaming in my yard, refusing to leave when asked, causing enough stress that I went into early labor." Mom's face had crumpled. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." "We had no idea she was." "Yes, you did," I'd interrupted gently but firmly. "You've known Emma's behavior was escalating. You've known she's been calling and texting and showing up uninvited. You've known, and you've chosen to make excuses instead of setting boundaries." Dad had been quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from us?" he'd asked finally. "I need you to tell Emma that her behavior is unacceptable," I'd said. "I need you to make it clear that harassment and intimidation won't be tolerated. I need you to prioritize my health and my baby's safety over Emma's feelings." "But she's struggling too," Mom had said automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, of course your health comes first, but Emma is also pregnant and dealing with." A lot of stress, Mom, I'd said, cutting her off. Emma's stress doesn't give her the right to endanger my pregnancy. Emma's feelings don't take precedence over my baby's lives. The conversation had been a turning point. For the first time, my parents had been forced to confront the reality of Emma's behavior without the buffer of family dynamics and long-standing patterns of enabling. "You're right," Dad had said finally. "This has gone too far." Mark had been less diplomatic when Emma had tried to visit the hospital later that evening. "Absolutely not," he'd told the nurse who'd come to ask if I wanted to see my sister. "She's the reason my wife is here. She's not allowed anywhere near this room." "She says she just wants to apologize," the nurse had said uncertainly. "She can apologize from a distance," Mark had replied firmly. "She's demonstrated that she's a threat to my wife's health and my children's safety." When Emma had persisted, trying to push past hospital security to get to my room, Mark had requested a formal no-contact order. "She's escalating," he told the social worker who'd come to assess the situation. "First it was manipulation and guilt trips, then it was harassment and property destruction. Now it's intimidation that triggered preterm labor. I won't wait to see what comes next." The no-contact order had been granted immediately. Emma was banned from the hospital, from our home, from any direct contact with me for the remainder of my pregnancy. "This is ridiculous," she'd apparently told our parents when they'd informed her of the restrictions. "I'm not a threat to anyone. Sylvia is being dramatic." But the hospital bracelet told a different story. The medical records told a different story. The fact that I'd nearly delivered 24-week-old twins because of stress Emma had caused told a very different story. I almost lost them, I told my parents during their next visit. The babies I fought 3 years to conceive, the twins, that are my miracle after all that heartbreak. I almost lost them because Emma couldn't handle not being the center of attention. "We know," Mom had said, tears in her eyes. "We're so sorry, Sylvia. We should have intervened sooner. Why didn't you?" I'd asked. "Why did it take a medical emergency for you to acknowledge that Emma's behavior was out of control?" The question had hung in the air like an accusation because that's exactly what it was. "We were trying to keep the peace," Dad had said finally. "We thought if we gave both of you space to work it out." "There was nothing for me to work out," I'd said. I set reasonable boundaries, and Emma responded with harassment and intimidation. The peace you were trying to keep was built on my acceptance of unacceptable behavior. Dr. Martinez had discharged me with strict instructions: bed rest for the motive. Next week, reduced activity for the remainder of the pregnancy, and absolutely no stressful situations. "Your body has sent you a clear message," she'd said. "Listen to it. These babies need you to prioritize their health above everything else." As Mark helped me into the car for the ride home, I clutched the hospital bracelet in my hand, a tangible reminder of what Emma's anger had nearly cost me. "She could have killed them," I'd said quietly. "Her tantrum could have killed my babies, but it didn't," Mark had said firmly. "They're safe, you're safe, and Emma can't hurt you anymore." The no-contact order would remain in place for the rest of my pregnancy. Emma's access to me, her ability to manipulate and intimidate and control, had been legally severed. For the first time since her pregnancy announcement at my baby shower, I felt truly safe. Emma couldn't call, couldn't text, couldn't show up at my house. She couldn't stress me into premature labor or endanger my babies with her emotional volatility. The hospital bracelet went into my jewelry box, where it would stay as a reminder of the day I finally chose my children's safety over my sister's feelings. Some relationships, I'd learned, were worth fighting for. Others were worth walking away from. Emma had made the choice for me. The amended will documents in my father's desk drawer would later serve as proof that my parents had finally seen Emma's behavior for what it truly was. Equal inheritance, equal treatment, equal expectations for the first time in our families. History. It had taken a week after my hospital scare for my parents to fully process what had happened. A week of sitting with the reality that their younger daughter's behavior had nearly caused their older daughter to lose her babies. A week of confronting the patterns they'd enabled, the favoritism they'd normalized, the consequences they'd ignored. Dad had called me on a Tuesday morning, his voice heavy with something I'd never heard before: shame. "Sylvia, your mother and I need to come over," he'd said. "We need to talk to you about some things, and we need to apologize." They'd arrived that afternoon carrying a folder of legal documents and expressions of genuine remorse that I'd waited 32 years to see. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," Mom had said, settling into our living room chair with uncharacteristic hesitancy. "About Emma's behavior, about our response to it, about the patterns in our family. We've been enablers," Dad had said bluntly. "We've made excuses for Emma's selfishness and put the burden of managing her emotions on you. And it nearly cost us our grandchildren." The directness of his admission had been startling. For decades, my parents had operated under the assumption that family peace was worth any sacrifice, that understanding and forgiveness should be automatic, that calling out bad behavior was somehow unkind. "We called Dr. Patterson," Mom had continued, referencing the family therapist they'd apparently consulted. "We wanted to understand how we'd contributed to this situation." Dr. Patterson, according to my parents, had been brutally honest about their role in creating the family dynamic that had led to Emma's harassment and my hospitalization. "She told us we've been practicing what she called differential parenting," Dad had explained. "Holding you to higher standards while excusing Emma's behavior because we saw her as more fragile or needy. She said we taught Emma that her emotions were everyone else's responsibility to manage," Mom had added, tears in her eyes. "And we taught you that your needs didn't matter as much as keeping the peace." The folder Dad had brought contained their amended will, a document that would have shocked me 6 months earlier but felt long overdue now. "We've changed our inheritance plan," he'd said, handing me the papers. "Everything split equally between you and Emma with equal expectations and equal treatment. The old will, I learned, had been heavily skewed in Emma's favor. She'd been designated as the primary inheritor of their house, their investments, their savings, all based on the assumption that she'd need more help getting established, while I was more self-sufficient. Emma always seemed to need more support," Mom had explained. "More financial help, more emotional guidance, more intervention when things went wrong. We thought we were being compassionate." "What you were being was enabling," I'd said, not unkindly, but firmly. "You taught Emma that her problems were everyone else's responsibility to solve. We know that now," Dad had said. "Dr. Patterson helped us see that our different expectations created Emma's sense of entitlement and your sense of responsibility for everyone else's emotions." The conversation had continued for hours, a reckoning decades in the making. My parents had laid out pattern after pattern of differential treatment, examining each one with the clarity that only crisis can bring. Emma's college tuition, fully paid by her parents while I'd worked and taken loans. "We thought she needed more support academically," Mom had explained. "Emma's car payments, insurance, and maintenance, all handled by Dad while I've been expected to manage my own transportation. She seemed less mature, less capable of handling adult responsibilities," he'd said. "Emma's emotional crises, always requiring immediate family intervention, while my struggles had been met with advice to be stronger and work through it independently. We thought you were more resilient," Mom had admitted. "The truth is," Dad had said finally, "we failed both of you. We failed Emma by not teaching her to be self-sufficient and accountable. And we failed you by taking your strength for granted and burdening you with responsibilities that weren't yours." "Why now?" I'd asked. "What made you finally see it?" "The hospital," Mom had said immediately. "Seeing you in that bed, knowing that Emma's behavior had put you and the babies at risk, broke through all our justifications and excuses. We realized we'd rather have a daughter who's angry with us for setting boundaries than lose a daughter and grandchildren because we were too cowardly to intervene. Dad had added, the amended will was just the beginning. They'd also informed Emma that her wedding funding, previously promised as a generous gift, would now be limited to the same amount they'd given Mark and me for our wedding. She didn't take that well, Mom had said with masterful understatement. According to my parents, Emma's reaction to their new boundaries had been predictably explosive. She'd accused them of favoritism, of being manipulated by me, of ruining her wedding and her life. She said we were choosing sides, Dad had reported. We told her we were choosing safety and accountability over enabling and chaos. What about the no contact order? I'd asked, how is Emma handling that? She's furious, Mom had said. She keeps insisting that you're being dramatic, that the hospital visit was a coincidence, that she's being unfairly punished for a simple family disagreement. The fact that Emma still couldn't acknowledge the severity of her behavior, still couldn't see the connection between her harassment and my medical emergency, had been telling. She asked us to intervene, Dad had said, to convince you to drop the no contact order and let her apologize. And what did you tell her? We told her that she needs to demonstrate real change in her behavior before anyone considers modifying the restrictions. Mom had said firmly. We told her that your safety and the baby's health come first. It had been the first time in my memory that my parents had prioritized my well-being over Emma's emotional comfort. The first time they'd allowed Emma to experience the full consequences of her actions without rushing to cushion the blow. Dr. Patterson says change is possible, Dad had said, but it requires Emma to acknowledge that her behavior has been harmful and to commit to doing the work of changing it. Has she shown any willingness to do that? I'd asked. Not yet, Mom had admitted. She's still in the anger and denial phase. But Dr. Patterson says that's normal for people who've never faced real consequences before. The conversation had ended, with my parents making a promise that had brought tears to my eyes. We will never again ask you to sacrifice your well-being for Emma's comfort, Dad had said. We will never again expect you to be the one who compromises and understands and makes allowances. You matter just as much as Emma does, Mom had added. Your needs are just as important as hers. Your happiness is just as valuable as hers. It had taken 32 years and a near medical crisis for my parents to see me as an individual worthy of protection rather than just the responsible daughter who could handle anything as they'd prepared to leave. Dad had paused at the door. Need you to know, he'd said, that we're proud of you for setting boundaries, for protecting yourself and the babies, for refusing to enable Emma's behavior even when it would have been easier. It took courage, Mom had added. More courage than we had for far too many years. After they left, I'd sat with the amended will documents, proof that my parents had finally awakened to the dysfunction they'd created and perpetuated. Equal treatment, equal expectations, equal love. It wouldn't undo 32 years of differential parenting, but it was a start. It was an acknowledgement that they'd been wrong, that change was possible, that families could break toxic patterns if they were willing to do the hard work. The twins moved inside me as I filed the documents away, as if they approved of their grandparents' newfound clarity. They would grow up in a family where boundaries were respected, where consequences were enforced, where love wasn't conditional on compliance. Emma could choose to do the work of changing, or she could choose to remain angry and isolated. But either way, she would no longer be everyone else's responsibility to manage. For the first time in my life, my family's priorities were finally in the right order. Safety first, accountability second, peace only if it didn't require enabling harmful behavior. It felt like a revolution. It felt like justice. It felt like the beginning of something healthier for all of us, including Emma, if she ever chose to participate. The first photo of my twins, taken moments after their birth, would become the most precious image in my phone, too tiny. Perfect faces pressed together, their eyes closed, their hands intertwined as if they'd been holding on to each other throughout their journey into the world. Lily Rose and Samuel James Allen, born at 6:43 and 6:47 a.m. on May 28th, weighing 5 pounds, 4 ounces and 5 pounds 7 ounces respectively. Healthy, breathing on their own, absolutely perfect. "They're beautiful," Mark had whispered, tears streaming down his face as he watched the nurses clean and assess our babies. "Sylvia, they're perfect." The delivery had been surprisingly smooth for twins. Despite all the warnings about complications in early labor, the babies had waited until 36 weeks to make their appearance early, enough to require some extra monitoring, but late enough to avoid major medical issues. Dr. Martinez had been amazed. After the stress incident in June, I was worried we'd see them much earlier, she'd said as she examined both babies. But they seemed determined to prove that they're fighters, just like their mom. Fighters, just like their mom. The phrase had resonated deeply as I'd held my children for the first time. After 3 years of fertility struggles, months of family drama, and weeks of high-risk pregnancy monitoring, Lily and Samuel had arrived safely despite every obstacle. Room had been peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. No drama, no conflict, no emotional manipulation, just Mark and me and our newborn twins. Finally getting to meet the babies we'd fought so hard to conceive and protect. My parents had been the first visitors, arriving with flowers and tears, and the kind of pure joy that had nothing to do with competition or comparison. "They're gorgeous," Mom had breathed, holding Lily with the reverence reserved for miracles. "Look at those tiny fingers. Look at that perfect little face." Dad had been equally smitten with Samuel, his gruff exterior melting completely as he cradled his grandson. "He's got your nose, Sylvia," he'd said with wonder, "and Mark's chin. How are you feeling?" Mom had asked, settling into the chair beside my bed while continuing to marvel at Lily. "Tired," I'd said honestly, "but incredible. Like, I can't believe they're really here, really ours, really healthy." "No complications from the early labor scare?" Dad had asked, still gently bouncing Samuel. "None," I'd confirmed. Dr. Martinez says the bed rest and stress reduction made all the difference. They were able to stay in long enough to develop properly. The stress reduction. We all knew what that meant. The no contact order with Emma, the boundaries my parents had finally enforced, the protection from emotional chaos that had allowed my body to carry the twins to a safe delivery point. "How's Emma?" I'd started to ask, then stopped myself. This wasn't the time for family drama. This was the time for celebrating my children. "She's been asking about you," Mom had said carefully, "about the babies. She wants to know if she can visit." I looked at my sleeping twins, so peaceful and vulnerable, and felt the protective instinct surge through me like a physical force. "Not yet," I'd said firmly. "Not until I'm ready, and not until she's demonstrated real change in her behavior." "We understand," Dad had said immediately. "Your recovery and the baby's well-being come first." The conversation had been a stark contrast to every family discussion of the past year. No pressure to forgive for the sake of family peace. No expectation that I should prioritize Emma's feelings over my own needs. No assumption that birth would automatically reset all boundaries. Mark's parents had visited next, followed by close mush. Friends who'd supported us through the fertility journey and the family conflict. Each visit had been purely celebratory, focused entirely on welcoming Lily and Samuel into the world. "They're so alert," my friend Sarah had observed, watching the twins track movement with their eyes. "It's like they're already curious about everything." "They've been through a lot already," I'd said, stroking Lily's cheek. "They had to be strong to survive everything that happened during the pregnancy." The everything that had happened. The shower announcement, the manipulation and harassment, the medical emergency that had nearly triggered early labor, the family reckoning that had followed. My twins had weathered it all from inside my womb, and now they were here, healthy and whole. Emma gave birth yesterday, Mom had mentioned during her second visit when the twins were 2 days old. A boy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She named him Connor. I'd felt a complex mix of emotions at the news. Relief that Emma's baby was healthy, sadness that our children would grow up separated by family conflict, and a protective determination that my twins wouldn't be dragged into the drama that had defined my relationship with their aunt. How is she? I'd asked because despite everything, Emma was still my sister and Connor was still my nephew. Overwhelmed, Mom had said honestly. The delivery was difficult and she's struggling with breastfeeding. James is trying to help. But she trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Emma, who'd never learned to handle challenges independently, was probably expecting everyone else to solve her parenting problems, while she recovered from the shock of how difficult newborn care actually was. Is she asking for help from you and Dad? Constantly, Dad had said. But Dr. Patterson has been coaching us on maintaining boundaries. We're offering support, not enabling dependence. The fact that my parents were still seeing the family therapist, still working on changing decades of dysfunctional patterns, had been encouraging. Real change was possible, even if it was slow and difficult. She's also still asking about visiting you, Mom had said carefully. She says she wants to meet the twins and apologize for what happened. What did you tell her? That apologies need to be backed up by changed behavior, Dad had said firmly, and that you'll decide when and if you're ready for contact. Looking at my sleeping babies, I tried to imagine a future where Emma was part of their lives, where family gatherings included both sets of cousins, where holidays weren't divided by conflict, where my children knew their aunt as someone other than the source of their mother's stress. It was possible, but only if Emma did the hard work of changing. The old Emma, the one who threw things when she didn't get her way, who harassed pregnant women over wedding plans, who couldn't accept not being the center of attention, would never be allowed near my children. But the theoretical new Emma, one who could acknowledge her mistakes and commit to healthier patterns, might someday earn the privilege of being Aunt Emma. I want my children to have family, I'd told Mark that evening as we took turns holding the twins. But I want them to have healthy family relationships, not toxic ones disguised as love. They have healthy family, Mark had said, nodding toward my parents, who'd spent the day taking turns cuddling their grandchildren. They have grandparents who've learned to set boundaries and prioritize everyone's well-being equally. And they have parents who will protect them from manipulation and emotional chaos, I'd added, looking down at Lily's perfect sleeping face. They'll never doubt that their needs matter just as much as anyone else's. The twins had stirred in our arms as if they could sense the conversation about their future. Samuel had opened his eyes and stared directly at me with an intensity that seemed impossible for a newborn. "Hi, sweet boy," I'd whispered. "I'm your mama." I fought so hard. For you and your sister, I'm going to keep fighting for you every day. As if in response, Samuel had wrapped his tiny fingers around mine and held on tight. The no-contact order would remain in place indefinitely. Emma's access to my family, to me, to Mark, to our children, would be earned through demonstrated change, not automatically granted because of blood relation. It was a hard line to draw, but it was the right one. My twins deserved to grow up in peace, protected from the kind of emotional volatility that had nearly endangered their lives before they were even born. The first photo on my phone captured that moment. Perfectly two babies who'd overcome every obstacle to arrive safely in the world, held by parents who'd finally learned to prioritize what truly mattered. Family wasn't about blind. loyalty, or unconditional enabling. Family was about love backed up by respect, support balanced with accountability, and relationships that made everyone involved better rather than smaller. Lily and Samuel would grow up understanding that difference. They would never have to choose between their own well-being and someone else's comfort, never have to make themselves smaller to accommodate someone else's dysfunction. The cycle of unhealthy family patterns that had defined my childhood was ending with me. My children would inherit something better: boundaries that protected instead of limited, love that empowered instead of controlled, family relationships that added joy instead of stress. As I looked at that first photo of my twins, I saw not just two beautiful babies, but two reasons to keep fighting for what was right instead of what was easy. They were my motivation to stay strong, my proof that some things were worth protecting at any cost. The new beginning wasn't just about their birth. It was about the family we were choosing to become: healthier, stronger, and finally free from the patterns that had hurt us for so long. The thank you cards scattered across my kitchen table told the story of how profoundly my life had changed. Cards from friends who'd supported me through fertility struggles, family members who'd celebrated the twin announcement, coworkers who'd covered for me during bed rest, and even acquaintances who'd simply offered encouragement during the most challenging year of my life. 6 months after Lily and Samuel's birth, I was finally catching up on the correspondence that had piled up. During those intense early weeks of twin parenthood, each card was a reminder of the community I built, the support I'd received, and the person I'd become through the crucible of that transformative year. Thank you for your strength and courage in setting boundaries. Read one card from my friend, Sarah. Watching you stand up for yourself and your babies inspired me to examine my own relationships. Your journey taught us all about the difference between enabling and loving, wrote my cousin Lisa. Thank you for showing us what healthy boundaries look like. Mark found me at the table, surrounded by cards and memories, both twins napping peacefully in their bouncy seats nearby. The thank you project? He asked, settling into the chair across from me. Finally, I said, holding up a card from Dr. Martinez. I can't believe how many people reached out during everything that happened. You touched a lot of lives by standing up for yourself, Mark said. A lot of people saw your courage and found their own. It was true. In the months since the twins' birth, I've heard from numerous friends and family members who'd been inspired to examine their own relationships, to set their own boundaries, to stop enabling toxic behavior in their lives. Emma called Mom yesterday, I said, setting down the card I'd been reading. Apparently, Connor isn't sleeping well, and she's struggling with the adjustment to motherhood. Is she asking for help? She's demanding it, I said with a rueful smile. According to Mom, Emma expected our parents to essentially move in and take over baby care so she could recover properly from childbirth. And what did they say? They offered to help with specific tasks on a schedule that worked for everyone, I said. But they made it clear that parenting Connor is Emma and James's responsibility, not theirs. The old version of my parents would have dropped everything to rescue Emma from the challenges of new parenthood. The new version, shaped by months of therapy and hard-won insights, were offering support without enabling dependence. How did Emma take that? About as well as you'd expect, I said. Apparently, she accused them of not caring about their grandson and compared their response to how much help they gave us after the twins were born. The comparison was particularly ironic since my parents had actually given us very little hands-on help, respecting our space while offering emotional support. Emma had apparently expected them to function as live-in nannies. She's also been asking about seeing the twins, I added. Through Mom, since the no-contact order is still in place. Mark's expression grew serious. What are you thinking about that? I looked at Lily and Samuel, now 6 months old and thriving. They were alert, happy babies who smiled at everyone they met. In 6 months, they'd never experienced the kind of emotional chaos that had defined my own childhood. I'm thinking she needs to demonstrate real change before I even consider it, I said. Not just apologize, not just promise to do better, but actually show sustained different behavior. What would that look like? Therapy, I said immediately. Real therapy, not just a few sessions to appease people. Acknowledgement of how her behavior affected me and endangered the babies. A genuine understanding of why boundaries exist and why they need to be respected. And if she does all that, I considered the question seriously, then maybe eventually supervised visits, brief ones, with clear expectations about behavior and immediate consequences if those expectations aren't met. The truth was, I missed. My sister, not the Emma who'd hijacked my baby shower and harassed me during pregnancy, but the Emma I'd grown up with. The little girl who'd built blanket forts with me, who'd shared secrets and dreams, who'd been my first friend before she became my greatest source of stress. I want Lily and Samuel to have an aunt, I said, but only if that aunt can be a healthy presence in their lives. And if Emma chooses not to do the work, then they'll have parents who prioritize their well-being over family drama, I said. They'll have grandparents who learn to love without enabling. They'll have a family that functions based on respect and boundaries rather than guilt and manipulation. Mark reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You've come so far, he said. A year ago, you would have been agonizing over whether to give Emma another chance, regardless of whether she'd earned it. He was right. The old Sylvia would have felt guilty for keeping Connor's cousins from him, would have worried about family unity, would have eventually caved to pressure to reconcile for the sake of peace. The new Sylvia understood that peace without justice wasn't really peace at all. It was just the temporary absence of conflict, maintained by the continued sacrifice of those willing to absorb abuse for the greater good. I learned something important this year, I said, looking down at one of the thank you cards. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make you mean. Protecting your children from dysfunction doesn't make you vindictive. What does it make you? Responsible, I said simply. Responsible for creating the kind of family environment you want your children to inherit. Lily stirred in her bouncy seat, making the soft cooing sounds that never failed to melt my heart. Samuel followed suit, and soon both babies were awake and looking around with the bright curiosity that characterized everything they did. Good morning, sweethearts, I said, moving to lift Lily while Mark got Samuel. Ready for some playtime? As we settled on the floor with the twins, surrounded by toys and laughter, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The fertility struggles that had taught me perseverance. The family conflict that had taught me boundaries. The medical scare that had taught me priorities. Do you ever regret how everything happened? Mark asked, watching Samuel reach for a colorful toy. I regret that it was necessary, I said honestly. I regret that Emma couldn't respect my boundaries without legal intervention. I regret that my parents needed a crisis to recognize the dysfunction they'd enabled. But not the outcome? Not the outcome, I confirmed. Look at them, Mark. Look at how peaceful they are, how secure. They're growing up in a home where love doesn't require sacrifice, where boundaries are respected, where their needs matter, just as much as anyone else's. Lily grabbed my finger and held on tight, her eyes fixed on my face with absolute trust. She would never doubt that she mattered, never learn that her feelings were less important than someone else's comfort, never be taught that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment. I want to write something, I said suddenly, for them to read when they're older, about what happened this year, about why I made the choices I made. Like a letter? Like a legacy, I said. I want them to understand that healthy relationships require mutual respect. I want them to know that it's possible to love someone and still refuse to enable their harmful behavior. I want them to see that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. The thank you cards scattered across the table were proof that my choices had rippled outward, inspiring others to examine their own relationships and claim their own worth. Lily and Samuel would grow up knowing that their mother had fought for what was right, not just what was easy. Dear Lily and Samuel, I said out loud, already composing the letter in my mind. This is the story of how you came into the world during a year when everything changed. This is the story of how your mother learned to stop making herself smaller to accommodate other people's dysfunction. This is the story of how we built the family you deserved, one where love and respect go hand in hand. Mark smiled. They're lucky to have you as their mother. They're lucky to have parents who learn the difference between peace and justice, I corrected, who chose to model healthy boundaries instead of just hoping for the best. As evening settled around us, the twins content and sleepy from their playtime, I gathered up the thank you cards that represented so much more than gratitude. They represented a community of people who'd witnessed my transformation and been inspired by it. The girl who'd spent 32 years being the supporting character in everyone. Elsa's story had finally become the hero of her own life, and in doing so, she'd created a legacy for her children, one where they would never have to choose between their own well-being and someone else's emotions. The thank you cards would be saved in a memory box along with the ultrasound photos, the hospital bracelet, and the first pictures of the twins. Someday, when Lily and Samuel were old enough to understand, I would share this story with them. I would tell them about the year everything changed, the year their mother found her voice, the year our family learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. And I would watch their faces as they realized that they'd inherited something precious, the knowledge that they matter, that their needs are valid, that standing up for themselves is not just acceptable but necessary. The cycle of dysfunction that had defined my childhood was ending with me. My children would grow up knowing they were worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth celebrating. That was the greatest gift I could give them. That was the legacy I wanted to leave. That was what real love looked like